I'd like to call the meeting of the Committee of the Whole of the Urbana Council to order. Would the clerk please call the roll?
Ms. Barnes? Here. Mr. Bowersox?
Here.
Ms. Shenelwood?
Present.
Mr. Lewis? Mr. Roberts?
Here.
Mr. Smythe? Ms. Stevenson?
Present.
Mayor Pressing?
Okay, first we have a question of additions or changes to the agenda. Are there any requested? Okay. Staff report is the next thing on the agenda. Do we have any specific staff reports at this time? Yes, Mayor Pressing.
I would just like to tell you about some communications I've received. One of them is from the County of Champaign. They're putting together a committee for Lincoln's Bicentennial, which is 2009, and they're asking the cities of Urbana and Champaign to appoint 5 people each to this committee. So I'll be bringing that to you, but in the meantime, if you know of anyone that you think would be interested in celebrating Abraham Lincoln's birthday, let me know. I've also received a letter from Wesley United Methodist Church. They think that we are currently have some program for recycling compact fluorescent light bulbs. I'm afraid our reputation exceeds our actual performance on this one. I talked to Bill Gray, and we don't have such a program, but they have a letter to you asking for such a program to be set up. These are long-lasting bulbs. Apparently, maybe in 5 years or so, we'll have to deal with this, so we should plan for it. There is apparently some bit of mercury in these bulbs, and that's what they're trying to deal with. I do have a letter from the MTD, and they're expressing their support for Carl Foundation's expansion of the medical campus north of University Avenue. They've discussed this with Carl, and they think that Carl is willing to do the trip reduction program and put forth some of the recommendations from their consultants from a few years ago. So they're encouraging us to do that. And finally, I do have one application that you might want to note for Civilian Review Board. It is Mayor Jerry Schweihart of Champaign. I don't think he qualifies, but thank you very much, Jerry, for your interest.
Okay. Thank you, Mayor. We have next the approval of the minutes of our previous meeting of the Committee of the Whole. Would anybody like to make a motion concerning the minutes?
So moved.
All right. Lynn Barnes moves approval, and Charlie Smythe seconds it. Any discussion about the minutes or corrections? Those in favor of approving the minutes, please indicate by saying so by aye. Saying aye. Those opposed? Okay, the minutes are approved. We have a fair amount of public input, and it's equally divided between people who wish to speak at the time of the item and at this current time before all the items are brought forward. So I'll start with those individuals, and we'll start with Robert Dunn, who wants to speak in opposition to items on UPTV. Is that correct?
Oh, I know.
You can define what you're speaking
about. My name is Robert Dunn. I live at 1910 South Ray Street. I wanted to speak in concern about what about a week ago I was viewing on Urbana Public Television, and unfortunately there was no labeling of the event that occurred, but what I saw was looked like a group of kids in this chambers performing rap music with very questionable lyrics. None of the lyrics had any profanity in it, but the content, from what I remember, was just extremely inappropriate and extremely offensive. A lot of the lyrics that are promoting violence, disrespect towards women, and again, there was no label before the program started to who the organization was that put on this event, or what time it started, or anything. And I'm just concerned that since Urbana Public Television is public television for the city of Urbana, and especially since this was aired during what is considered family time, like the evening hours, when like young children could be watching, that this really looks negative for the city of Urbana, because if someone were to say, like, we're just passing through town and we're staying at one of our motels, and they're just like flipping through, and they just happen to look at Urbana Public Television on Channel 6 and see this, what would they think of the city of Urbana? Would they say, well, there's like a bunch of kids that looks like they don't have any adult supervision, and they're just, in the council chambers, having fun and, singing like really offensive lyrics. And that's like one of my concerns I think really needs to be addressed. The other one is from this one show, I just started like watching Urbana Public Television on a regular basis, see what else is on. And I've noticed that the overwhelming, outside of actual government meetings, the overwhelming majority of the programming has an extreme political slant to the left. And I mean, it makes a lot of this programming makes like today's Democratic Party look like the John Birch Society. I mean, when you're having a program that, by the way, doesn't even have a disclaimer before it that says that the views and opinions of this program do not necessarily represent the views of the Urbana City Council or the city of Urbana, and the topic of the program was who really caused 9/11, and the implication was that the Bush administration had something to do with it. I'm really concerned about this. I'm not trying to say that let's censor him, but it's just, I know Urbana does have like, a generalization or a stereotype of being, a far left city. It's been dubbed the People's Republic of Urbana, but I really think we're a lot more diverse than that, and I really think that a channel that's taxpayer funded should have, one, more balance, and two, more control over, what content there is. I mean, this bunch of kids singing really offensive lyrics has nothing to do with political speech, and, I really don't think should be allowed on Urbana Public Television. And
Ron, maybe you can wrap up.
Okay. What I'm basically just asking is that Urbana Public Television be reviewed, and that there be more balanced programming and more wholesome programming, especially during the evening hours. Thank you.
Thank you. Are any questions for Ron? Robert? Okay, thank you very much. We have a few more people here. Danny Otto would like to speak at this time on historic preservation and demolition review. And try to, 5 minutes about conversation.
I won't take long. I decided to speak now since I didn't want to come back twice, and there's several agenda items. I'm strongly in support of the historic preservation incentives as simply a first step in trying to help people preserve the architectural history of this community. I think the items proposed there are sound, and I think over time the council should look at strengthening those. There's all sorts of research that shows that the tax base of a community is preserved with well-maintained historic structures. The structures that are replacing the historic structures are oftentimes built out of shoddy, cheap material, and our neighborhoods now are littered with buildings that are 20 years old and probably have another 20-year lifespan. You look at some of the new stuff that is being built, the big apartment complex up at Bradley and Lincoln in the northwest corner. Every time you drive by there after a storm, siding has blown off, shingles are blowing off. That's going to be a blight on the community in 20 years. So every study shows that historic preservation enhances the tax base of the community, enhances the quality of life, and so I think that's the sound idea. As part and parcel of that, it's related to that. If people can simply come in and get a permit and without any sort of obstacles knock down buildings that still have a viable future, then this building stock is simply lost, never to be replaced. And I don't have to make the argument. You all drive these streets. You know that when stuff gets knocked down here, it's very rare that anything of quality is built to replace it. Two additional points that are partially related to this, but not directly. One last night, we were talking about the public access channel, and I don't watch it very often, but somehow or another last night I was cruising through my channels and I saw a meeting being held in here, and so I tuned in, and it was actually something from July, the Board of Review on a zoning variance, and it had to do with the frat house over on Pennsylvania on campus. And so I got interested in that because I'm interested in zoning. And I listened to it. I think I probably saw most of that hearing. And the person asking for the zoning change, Jeff Wampler, said that the idea of changing it from R7 to B3 University was generated by city staff as the best thing to do, and that this was being forwarded with the recommendation that it be approved. And as I listened to the testimony, I was astounded that that could be the case, and then indeed the board unanimously voted down the request for changing for very, very sound reasons. So today I was curious, and I went online and I looked up the report to the board, and indeed it had been recommended that it be changed to B3U, something like that, by staff. I think that our staff is not leaning far enough in the direction of supporting what is consistently the will of the voters of this community to slow down this inappropriate conversion, to enforce every time we do a planning, long-term planning. The residents here come out and their will is very clear, and I think that city staff should be informed by those of you who are elected, who ultimately are their employer, that they're working for the residents of this community, and that every time someone comes along who has some idea to alter the zoning so that they can enhance the economic value of it, doesn't mean that it should be done. And one last point. Do I have one more minute?
You can take a minute more.
Okay. The other thing that I think the city should perhaps investigate, along with the other taxing bodies that depend upon real estate taxes, is do a review of the assessment of rooming house properties in contrast to single-family residences. My simple random review of that shows that the rooming houses are not paying their fair share of taxes, that they are consistently undervalued relative to other houses of similar size in the neighborhood. And when you try to look at that, sometimes it is even on the value of the lot, which has nothing to do with the quality of the structure on it. But one of the features that gets back to my first point, the city should be helping people with historic preservation. One of the things that the assessor can look at, and I don't know what can be done to change that, is the appearance of the building. So I have been living in my house for 3 years, and every year I'm doing something to improve it and try to restore it, and my assessments are just marching right on up. And the rental properties around me, where they're allowing them to decay, aren't going up at the same rate. So what you have there is an incentive for these landlords to let the exterior appearance as well as the interior quality decline. And that's perverse. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments, Danny. We're getting even more people who wish to comment, so try to be precise, and we'll continue. Francis Tarquette would like to speak.
Mine's more to the point of historic preservation. I filled in the wrong slot, the brochure on Royer, but I have.
You can talk about whatever topic you need to talk
Pardon?
about. You have 5 minutes to say whatever you need.
Okay, I'll try to, can I read quickly my statement? To whom it may concern, since Champaign and Urbana have been referred to as the Twin Cities ever so many years, and many people attached to the University of Illinois have historically resided in the said Twin Cities, it would seem to be to our advantage to join forces with the U of I, meaning the city of Urbana and the city of Champaign, to do our best to preserve the significant buildings of all three areas of our community. There are many beautiful examples, I might add. It could shore up community spirit and help preserve our rich heritage of inspiring architecture for future generations of children, as well as the young adults who come here to learn. Psychologists claim violence begets violence, yet at the same time, they recognize that environmental beauty calms the spirit and fosters peace. It is in that spirit that I make my proposal that preservation of our communities be a joint effort of the community entire, not just one piece of the pie. And I'm a special fan of Nathan Ricker, who was the first Board of Trustees member at what is now called the Channing Murray Foundation, but was the first Unitarian Church of Urbana around 1912. Many distinguished people, from Dan Fogelberg to Rabinendranath Tagore, are affiliated with that institution. And we were landmarked in 1991. It took a big effort, a lot of work, and the building had been threatened many times.
Thank you for your story. Chris Storr, did you want to speak before the items come up on individually? Yes. Okay. Please come forward. Did you want to come? Do you want to do it before or later?
I think I marked down that I'd come at the time of the demolition.
You marked them each, so I had to ask you. Okay. At the time. All right. Thank you. Alice Novak, speaking on historic preservation.
Hello, Alice Novak, 601 West Delaware. I asked to speak now because I'm not sure that I can hold out for whenever you get around to the other stuff. So I'm speaking to you as someone who's worked professionally in historic preservation for over 20 years, not in any other role that I might have. And first off, I just want to thank you for your support and interest that we have a preservation dialogue for the first time. And I think this is just very healthy no matter what the outcome is. Excellent staff reports and support as well. And you guys have put them to a lot of work in historic preservation. So we're all learning, and I think we've all been inspired by this as well. And also by the extraordinary research that Ilona Montkovsky and Brian Adams have been sharing with us as well. Naturally, I'm interested in all items that you have related to historic preservation at this meeting, but the one in particular is the demolition review or delay or et cetera. I called the chair of the Plainfield Historic Preservation Commission this afternoon just to get some feedback directly. And Plainfield has been cited in the report that you have for demolition delay. And so I just asked the chair, do you think it's worth it to have demolition delay? And he said, very much so, direct quote. And I said, well, why do you feel that way? Because, it's a lot extra work and such. And he mentioned several things. he mainly mentioned that it's caused developers to take pause, at least, and that they cannot prevent demolition in Plainfield, but he said that there has been a direct result of a backing off of tear-down requests, that the requests for tear-downs, in his words, have slowed down. He also thinks that the commission has been viewed more as being reasonable in that they have approved some demolitions as well for old buildings, and that's felt that that's been necessary through the process as well. So it's created a better ongoing working relationship among the preservation types and the developer types. He has also said that some developers have walked away from requests as well, that they have stepped back completely and withdrawn proposals due to the provision for demolition delay. He also said that at a bare minimum, it has inspired a greater increase in salvage efforts, and that also there's been more of an ability to have recordation, and that is at least some photography of the buildings, maybe interiors have been accessed if they are going to be demolished, so that there's at least a record of what existed in those cases. So for those reasons, he thought that it had really been a good thing to have added. He also admitted, though, that they hadn't had any huge controversies, that those were coming up, so we can keep an eye on what's going on in Plainfield. So I wanted to share that with you. I guess in looking at this, you know, whatever way you decide, I wanted to just bring up the National Register of Historic Places as a process that's a little bit akin to what we're looking at in demolition delay. The National Register of Historic Places, as you know, places no restrictions on anybody as far as property rights, but has a couple of financial incentives that are companion with that. What it does provide is what we call a DOE, determination of eligibility, through and a review process for federal involvement in projects. And this is called the Section 106 process. What is interesting about National Register and this federal review, and in Illinois we have a state review called State Law 707, that's a state version of what the federal Section 106 provides. The National Register was created in 1966 by the same act that created this federal review in literally Section 106. So because National Register was just getting started, we didn't have anything on the National Register. So this federal review process, which says if there's any federal involvement in a project for federal money, license, permit, any kind of federal involvement whatsoever, we're going to look to see what the impact on historic resources is. We're not, and it allows us to comment on that. It doesn't mean that it's stopped necessarily. Sometimes it is, sometimes not. Because the National Register was just getting started, we didn't have anything on the National Register. The wording was such that it provided for DOE, determination of eligibility. And so the review applies to things that are either on or eligible to the National Register. So it gets us in for things that just haven't gone through the National Register process, that still might have merit to be eligible for the National Register. And so, you know, there are many, many more things that are included in the impact of federal and in Illinois state actions then because of this provision for DOE. We have sort of a similar situation in having a younger landmarks program and younger historic preservation ordinance, that there are many, many things that are eligible, and we haven't had the time, resources, efforts to get those things considered. So, you know, I think it's definitely worthy. I'm glad that you're considering it, you know, that you'll have a discussion on this to look at how to handle the dilemma of not having enough things recognized yet. You know, and I'll add for National Register, it's been around for over 40 years, and there's still many, many more things that are eligible to the National Register nationally that have not been listed on the National Register, and that includes places here as well. So, it's a very clever way, a good example of federal legislation being written the way it should be, and state legislation to provide for that. So I'll try to stick around in case there are any questions later. And then.
Yes, we have questions for you. Yes.
Couple of
Danielle.
quick questions. First, Alice, thanks for countless volunteer hours working on historic preservation in this community. I have a couple of questions for you in case you leave before we get to the topic. The first is, I know your class and classes on campus have conducted surveys of neighborhoods, and that's been really important and might be an important part of our future process. In the process of doing those surveys, are property owners notified after a survey is done or during a survey done, is there some relationship such that property owners know that their properties sit on a list of potential eligible historic structures?
No, nothing official. Sometimes when students are staring at somebody's house, they'll come out and ask what's going on.
Okay.
And they find out that way. Rebecca Bird contacted me before she did the staff report, and she was thinking there was some rhyme or reason as to why I selected the properties to be surveyed, and there's not.
Okay.
It's really a pragmatic situation where I'm looking for places that are walkable for students who don't have car access, and also for places that are vernacular properties as well as architectural style. So, so we've really stuck to mostly the West Urbana neighborhood and a little bit in the East Urbana neighborhood. I have provided the list. I keep an ongoing list of the property addresses that have been surveyed, listed by street, and I've given that to the city. And I think at least at one time I've given it to somebody with WUNA. So I don't know, Lisa's here I think, I don't know if it's been posted on the WUNA list or not, but I haven't done that to the extent that maybe I could have, so.
Well, a little bit of a follow-up question is are you aware amongst historic preservationists in town or grassroots organizations that there's a kind of list of properties that people have their eye on that's kind of larger than the set of properties that have been surveyed? I mean, are there other resources out there in terms of target properties or target areas in addition to the survey that we have from your class?
You mean for additional survey or additional landmarking?
Yeah, for potential merit, historic merit.
I'm not aware of anything like that. I mean, there have been these other surveys that are listed in the report that you have.
Okay.
And, frankly, some of those are quite dated. The two state surveys from 75 and 74 that are listed would just be photographs, and, the quality of these things varies a lot. But no, unfortunately, there just isn't enough funding in historic preservation in general that somebody has the luxury of going around and targeting. We do have a reconnaissance survey that was done in my workshop about 8 or 9 years ago, probably, and that looks at different neighborhood areas, and grouping things for future detailed surveying. But it's not really a wish list of potential landmarking.
Okay, thank you.
Brandon was next, and then Charlie.
Yeah, Alice, thanks again. One question I had about the Plainfield conversation that you had is one of the concerns with demolition delay and review is causing a load of staff work or commission work that we all of a sudden have to deal with all these cases, which are really the cases that, are in the worst shape. In your conversation with them, did that come up in Plainfield? Does it trigger any significant amount of staff time or any significant
Well, they
of the commission's
also
energy?
have a smaller staff, and they actually, Plainfield is tripling, quadrupling on an annual basis. The level of construction is mind-boggling. So they have a great deal of activity. I didn't talk in detail about the provisions of what they have, but one thing they do is the chair of the commission meets with a staff person, and there's certain things that don't even go to the commission at all. So it's sort of like what we have in our ordinance for provision of minor works, that there's some things that I as chair and Libby as zoning administrator are able to approve for changes to landmarks that just fly right through. So some of the things are dealt with in that capacity to help hurry things along. But as far as the detail of, no, I don't know that. I did want to add, in the staff report on page 6, there's a sentence about, and finally, demolition review often focuses on properties at the end of their life cycle, meaning that saving them requires a significant concentration of resources into properties of minor or moderate historic significance. Ouch. We've had 2 well-known instances of local landmarking saving 2 highly significant buildings, the Joseph Royer House, one of the 2 buildings in the Joseph Royer Historic District, and then also more recently 502 and 504 West Elm Street, at least, saved for now. So, some other things have slipped through the cracks, that weren't landmarks because, nobody had the time to go through the process for those, I guess. And, you know, the thing we hear all the time, and you guys have heard this a million times as well, that, you know, developers come in and say, oh, it's old and it's falling apart, and as if nobody had a role in the falling apart process. So, so there are other things to consider.
And Charlie?
Alice, thanks. How long has the Plainfield ordinance been in effect?
It's in the staff report,
Yeah.
in the NIFTY staff report,
I missed it.
2005, I think? So it's pretty new.
Okay. In talking to them, have they, you know, the whole issue here, and Danny Otto raised it earlier, which is demolition through neglect, and you just mentioned it too. You know, these places are being allowed to fall apart. Nobody's putting money into them. Can demolition delay or demolition review contribute to reversing that trend?
I don't know. I can't think of a specific instance. And demolition by neglect ordinances are really rare. I lived in Columbus, Ohio before I moved back here, and we had one in German Village Historic District. And it was related to code enforcement, and it was tough. And people would go in and get fined for letting things sit and rot. You know, I mean, it happens. You know, I don't know. I mean, I think a lot of that can be supported by just code issues and being sure that those things are adhered to.
Yeah, and of course, we've just put our stuff into effect within the last year, so we have no real way of measuring its impact yet. Okay, thanks.
I have one question, too, for you. Alice, when you emailed me earlier this morning, you were talking about the pretty exhaustive energy that it would take to canvass large, you know, a neighborhood of like 300 homes or 400 homes, that it would be the work of several years, perhaps, to adequately list and go through an entire neighborhood, you know, of like 20 blocks or 40 blocks. I don't know.
Yeah, for an intensive level survey.
Yeah. Which is one of the things which was recommended by staff as a way of preparing for a discussion of demolition review, that these things should be in place and then they should be called up handily so that it wouldn't take staff a great amount of time to do it. What would your recommendation be if it was required to prepare like a third of the city, you know, and have it canvassed for review? Your class has already done some surveying. Is that of a quality that could be applied readily in the future without having to go back and you know, rework it? And how do you think it's somewhat of a is it a necessary step?
Well, yeah, we should be doing survey. We're recognized as a certified local government, and part of our duties as that recognition through the state are to have an ongoing program of survey. So, yeah, it's something we need to do. When communities speak to me as a consultant in historic preservation and somehow have this impression that all survey has to be done before anything else can take place, it's just not a practical solution, because survey is very labor intensive. I myself have surveyed thousands and thousands and thousands of buildings. I want to scream if I do another survey. It's, you know, there's just...
For joy?
No. You know, it's a lot of work. Yes, we do need to do it, but it needs to be done, you know, over a period of years. The thing with survey is it's kind of a defeatist thing, because as soon as you're finally finished with it, some of it's out of date, so then you have to go back and survey is an ongoing process. Nobody except for the city of Chicago has all of their survey done in the state of Illinois. It's just unheard of, and now with certified local government grants being more limited, we're not getting the, you know, $20,000 survey grants to get a larger chunk of the survey done. So, you know, most surveys would maybe be 250 buildings, and then it takes years to really get at, you know, these significant chunks of older areas that we have in a community of this size.
If the demolition request load per year in our town is about 12 to 15 buildings, so do you think it's effective then to have a general survey, or should we be handling case by case?
Well, don't pin me into that.
I'm curious, that's all.
You know, as far as my students' work, you know, some's fantastic, some's at the opposite end of that. So I hope that it's useful. I think it's been useful in some decision-making already. And hopefully some of them are, quite well done and can be used for local landmarking and such as well. But I think we could even use the reconnaissance survey and look at the areas that have been identified as having older buildings. I mean, some things could be written off to immediately. We don't need to review anything in Stone Creek. There's nothing old there. And there are a number of areas that we could do that with. So I think there could be ways to whittle it down and make it a more manageable process, I would hope. And also provision like what Plainfield has, that under certain conditions, a decision can be made between a meeting of the chair of the commission and a staff person as well. So, it just depends. It depends on the resource, and it depends on, the research that's available. I mean, I would think in a day you can look through city directories, you can check Sanborn maps. There's certain basic things on any address that we can check and get some pretty quick information on. But, we wouldn't have the luxury to look through newspaper articles, although the Courier's partially searchable now. But, it just depends on the resource and the location and such. So in some cases it could be burdensome, but not always.
Well, thank you for your comments and expertise. Thank you so much. Okay, that concludes, I believe, the people who wish to speak before items come up on the agenda. There are a couple more. Okay, Mr. Stewart? All right.
Thank you, Dennis. I was going to wait until later, but Alice Novak brought up a couple of items that I would like to reiterate, and as those that were brought up at meetings of the Historic East Urbana Neighborhood Association, and that is the topic of code enforcement. One of the reasons that we're discussing demolition notification is because some of these homes were not properly cared for and neglected. And this violates, as I understand it, some of the norms and codes that we have here in the city. And I'd like to suggest that if we do advance this demolition topic, that I'd certainly like to see more attention paid to looking at these houses before they're brought up for developers for demolition. We've been up to this committee and whined about the wear down, tear down, and its effect on our neighborhood. As Alice had mentioned, code enforcement would be a way of would be an alternative to coming in at the very end with the demolition. I think I'll close with that.
Thank you, Chris. Are any questions for Mr. Stewart? Okay, thank you very much. And then we had one other person who wished to speak. Yes, please come forward. What is your name? Lisa. Okay, yeah, that's right. I should recognize you. Thank you, Lisa.
Good evening. Thank you so much, Council and Mayor, for your preservation efforts. I also am speaking not on behalf of as the co-coordinator of the West Urbana Neighborhood Association, but I have to say that there are many residents in the West Urbana Neighborhood Association that applaud the preservation efforts. And because they're not here tonight does not mean they're not interested. They're very interested, but as you guys know, it's rough to come here after a 12-hour day. So I'll keep my comments brief. They're my comments. I'm not representing the West Urbana Neighborhood Association. I want to make that clear. Obviously, I believe in preservation efforts, and I think that although I have to second what Alice had to say is I know that it might be arduous for some developers and for staff to go through a demolition review. It's really critical if we are going to really support preservation efforts in our city. And I think that you can do it in such a way like Plainfield has done, where they set it up where the ZBA and the chair of the commission, the Preservation Commission, can make some approvals that, but at least it makes us stop and think and makes it a much more thoughtful process. And I just think that the city of Urbana is a place that we are known for doing a thoughtful process, and so I really, truly support that. And I think that in the meantime, while we're discussing what should be done, should there be a demolition review, I think we could safely call for a moratorium on all demolitions, so there's not a rush for demolitions while the council and the staff work out whether or not there would be review of demolition policy and procedure put in place. So thank you so much, and I hope your meeting isn't too long. Charlie?
Yes, Charlie, go ahead.
I'm sorry, I was going to add to Lisa that I have heard from two constituents in the West Urbana neighborhood, Mickey Scheinman and Paul DeBevick, and they both speak in favor, much as you have done just now.
Great.
Thank you. I appreciate your comments, too.
Dennis, I have a general thing to make.
Okay, then go ahead.
Yeah, I'd like to publicly thank the Urbana Police Department and the U of I Police Department for their efforts on Saturday with Matt's Ride. We had 155 bicyclists in a 7-mile ride to commemorate the passing of Matt Wilhelm a year ago. The two Urbana officers, Jennifer DeFanis and Andy Hukins, came out on their bicycles on their day off, which was pretty impressive. We had John Whittington and Steve Melching of the U of I motorcycle force out to help us as well, and Chris Hawk, who is the U of I bicycle trainer as well. So we had great help on their part, and I'd like to publicly thank them all.
Before closing public comment, I just want to comment that 3 people did wish to make their feelings known about topics, but not to speak, and so I'm going to read those now. Louis Steinberg, 306 West Nevada, wishes to support the Joseph Royer, the Historic Preservation and the Demolition Review ordinances and the results. The same is true for those topics by Sonia Newmark, 706 West Iowa. She's here, and she wishes her views to be known about that she supports the Royer recognition, historic preservation incentives, and demolition review. And finally, Howard Gunther of 714 West Iowa speaks in favor of those 3 topics as well. Are there any other public inputs at this time? There will be an opportunity, and we have about 7 people who've asked to speak at the time of the topic, and so we shall proceed on, close this public comment for now, and go to the items of our agenda. The first being a presentation by the Illinois American Water Company concerning their new facility. We have presenters here, I understand, Mr. Suits and company. Yeah. Let's find a chair for you.
Oh, I can grab one. Oh, is he getting a nice?
Yeah. You could have a padded chair here at the Urbana City Council. Okay, thank you.
That we can get that straight. While we're getting the presentation, we do have a PowerPoint presentation this evening. My name is Barry Suits. I'm the Network Operations Manager of Illinois American Water. Our business address is 201 Devonshire Drive, Champaign, Illinois. And we're here tonight to make a presentation on our treatment plant project. I'd like to thank Mayor Prussing, Chairperson Roberts, and council members for providing this opportunity to update us, or update you, on our plan to build a new water treatment plant in Champaign County. With me tonight are 2 individuals. Fred Ruckman is our General Manager of the State of Illinois for Illinois American Water. Many of you may know Fred. He has been familiar with the Champaign Urbana system for many years. To my left is Brent O'Neill. He is a project manager, and he is in charge of our project for the new water treatment plant, and also for getting our slides horizontal as opposed to vertical, so we welcome him being here. We scheduled this presentation several weeks ago and intended to focus on the new water treatment plant project as an augment to a more thorough and technical presentation we gave to city staff from both communities of Champaign and Urbana, along with the University of Illinois. That presentation was in mid-June. However, since the company has recently filed a request with the Illinois Commerce Commission for a rate increase, I will be happy to discuss that item following the presentation and to answer any questions you might have. I'd like to move on to the water treatment plant in Champaign County. The new treatment plant is not new to any of us here tonight. It's a project that was forecast in 1998 as being needed at this time. It's a project that the company has been actively working on for 24 months, including meetings with city officials and staff. It is an investment in our company is making to meet the current needs and secure the future water service in Champaign County for the next 15 years. And it is also a significant factor in the rate increase we have requested. There is virtual agreement that our community needs this treatment plant, and we need it now. Our project is underway with the goal of being operational in December 2008 and fully ready to meet the peak water demands in the summer of 2009. Let me briefly discuss the water supply in Champaign County. Nearly a decade ago, Illinois American Water initiated a planning study that projected the need for a new water treatment plant after 2008. Since this initial planning study, the water company has continued to monitor, study, and update the projections and evaluate how to most effectively meet current and future demands for water in Champaign County. In tonight's presentation, I intend to provide some facts about our local water supply and the growing demand for water, review some facts about the Mahomet Aquifer and actions the company has taken to ensure the future sustainability of this valuable resource, update you on the current status of the new water treatment plant, update you on how this water treatment plant and capital investments during the last 5 years will impact residential water rates, and most importantly, answer your questions that you may have. Providing a reliable water supply will support the current and future needs of this community. That's why we're moving forward to build this water treatment plant. In 1996, the company initiated a long-range planning study to determine when additional capacity would be needed to support the communities we serve in Champaign County. The study predicted a new water treatment plant would be needed to support the peak customer demands beyond 2008. Existing water treatment facility sites are being fully utilized and cannot effectively be expanded, and scientific studies have indicated the need for a new location for additional source of water supply. The need for additional water capacity was demonstrated this summer when the company had to issue a voluntary water restriction notice during a prolonged period of hot, dry weather. A reliable supply of water will support the growth needs of this community. Some statistics, the U.S. Census Bureau, the population grew in Champaign County from around 6.7% in the period 1980 to 2000. If you look at the next 20 years, the Champaign County Regional Planning Commission expects Champaign County to grow by 15.6%, or nearly double what it grew in the last 20 years. Between 1980 and 2000, our average daily water demand in Champaign County increased by 35%, and our number of customers increased by 40%. This summer's dry spell pushed the capacity of the existing system. Thankfully, our customers made a concerted effort to conserve, and we quickly got rain. However, we may face the same issue again in 2008. Our new water treatment plant means the community won't face that problem in 2009. Every community faces the need to build a new water supply and treatment capacity at some point. The last time we needed to build a new water treatment plant on a new site was in 1960, or about 47 years ago. The residents in Champaign County receive the majority of their water from the Mahomet Aquifer. The Champaign County population that we serve is about 1/5 or 20% of the 800,000 people that use the Mahomet Aquifer as their primary water resource. The Mahomet Aquifer provides water to residents throughout east central Illinois, from just north of Danville at the Illinois-Indiana border westward to the Illinois River. The current average estimated withdrawal from the Mahomet Aquifer is between 80 and 90 million gallons per day on average. This withdrawal rate does not include wells privately owned by individual companies or irrigation wells used by farmers. State regulation requires Illinois American Water and other water authorities to report all water withdrawals to the Illinois Commerce Commission and to the Illinois EPA. We also provide this data annually to the city as well as to third-party organizations such as the Illinois State Water Survey and the U.S. Geological Survey. Illinois American Water's commitment to providing high-quality and reliable water service goes beyond just treating and delivering water to your home or to your business. We are serious about being a good steward of the Mahomet Aquifer, the primary source of water for our customers and the region. As our community continues to grow, we need to work together to properly manage our water resources to ensure the future sustainability of the Mahomet Aquifer. This is why we helped the Mahomet Aquifer Consortium be founded in 1998 and to study the Mahomet Aquifer as a regional water supply source. Today, the consortium has 70 members that cooperate to ensure the right decisions are made about future water needs of the region. I currently serve on the board of directors of that organization. Last year, Illinois American Water committed $600,000 to support comprehensive research on Mahomet Aquifer to determine the best way to preserve and protect the aquifer for future generations. We are also working with local officials, the Illinois State Water and Geological Surveys, and other water professionals to develop a regional water supply plan as part of the Governor's 2006 executive order. Brent O'Neill, who I introduced at the beginning, represents private water utilities as a member of the East Central Illinois Regional Water Supply Planning Committee that was created as part of this executive order. Another local leader and Savoy Village trustee, Bill Smith, was recently selected to replace Paul Berg as a representative for municipalities on this committee. This committee's charge is to study the Mahomet Aquifer and research local water supply issues. The committee will collect data on regional water supply demand projections to the year 2050 and compare those with water availability data from the state scientific surveys. The committee will then develop a regional water supply plan that will be recommended to the appropriate local, county, and state leaders. With all of our permits and approvals completed, we recently broke ground on the new water treatment plant. The new water treatment plant will be located on a 40-acre site at 560 County Road 1700 North, or Bradley Avenue Extended between 500 and 600 East County Road. The new treatment plant will have an initial capacity of 15 million gallons per day and can be expanded to 20 million gallons a day in the future. Approximately 1/3 of the initial capacity of the treatment plant is related to new and more stringent EPA regulatory requirements and their impact on our existing treatment facilities. The new plant will use the same lime softening process that we currently use and that has helped our customers have some of the best tasting water in America. The company plans to build 7 wells within the new well field near the water treatment plant, approximately 4.5 miles of raw water mains and 7 miles of distribution water mains, at a total projected cost of $51 million. Illinois American Water hired Whitman Hydro Planning Associates to help identify a location for the new water treatment plant, and we have worked with the Illinois State Water Survey throughout the process. Existing water treatment plant facility sites are being fully utilized and cannot effectively be expanded, and scientific studies have indicated the need for a new location for additional source of supply. The site was selected because the Mahomet Aquifer in that area is well suited to provide a sustainable supply to meet the community's future water needs with limited impact to the aquifer levels overall or on adjacent landowner wells. We have also contracted with the Illinois State Water Survey to measure actual water levels of adjacent wells prior to constructing our new well field and an analysis of the Mahomet Aquifer and local groundwater interactions. Since announcing the proposed site for the water treatment plant, the company has continued to meet with local landowners and public officials to discuss the plant's design and to listen to their concerns. In response, the water company made some modifications to the plant design to address some of the concerns raised during these meetings. We have included in your packet, I believe, a brochure, is that true, that gives more information on how we identified this location for the new water treatment plant, and we welcome any questions you might have generated from that brochure. The plant design itself will have an emphasis on energy efficiency and environmental stewardship. One way that will occur is the recycling of water. We plan to recycle all the water used for plant treatment. In other words, the water we use to treat water at the site is going to be recycled, and that's a significant amount and volume of water. The lime softening residue will be recycled and used as a farm soil conditioner. This practice means less solids placed in landfills and reduced use of natural resources. And in the end, it's more cost-effective for our customers. It saves them money. The water treatment plant will use dark sky lighting that prevents building lights being seen past the property line. We expect minimal noise, pervious pavement designed to provide better stormwater management, and the water treatment plant project includes an effective landscape buffer that will complement the natural setting. The site layout for the treatment plant encompasses approximately 25 acres of the total designated 40-acre site we own. The remainder of the site, or 15 acres, will have prairie plantings. We're currently working with Pheasants Forever to establish a designated natural habitat area. I don't want to sit here this evening and tell you that another $13.81 a month for any product is not difficult on some of our customers, including seniors. Any business thinks about the impact of an increase in price, and we are no different. However, we are at a place where this increase is needed. The 11-month open process before the Illinois Commerce Commission will mean that our company will have to provide thousands of pages of documentation to support our request before any increase occurs. Both the professional staff of the Illinois Commerce Commission and the Attorney General's office will scrutinize the case on behalf of all customers in every community we serve. There will be public meetings that will go along with our ongoing efforts to keep our customers informed. The rate case the company filed includes $44.5 million of the needed investment to build a new water treatment plant, or that represents about $6.64 a month for an average customer using 6,000 gallons of water per month. The remaining portion of the treatment plant will be part of a future rate filing. If fully approved, the residential water bill would increase $13.81 a month, or approximately 46 cents per day for the average customer. The remaining $7.17, the residential water bill, is representative of more than $12.7 million in capital investments since our last rate filing in 2002. Some examples of projects that are covered in this area are water main replacements that we're currently working on Urbana Street from Washington to Oregon, Anderson Street from Washington to Oregon, and Maple Street from California to Washington. Also, O&M increases are included in this $7.17. It's been 5 years since we filed for rates. We've worked hard to keep those O&M costs low, and they have increased at less than the average increase in water and sewer consumer price index, which is 6.07% per year for the same period. Our increases that we've requested are 4.56% as compared to 6.07. Since 2002, our costs for energy and fuel have increased by 55%. Our costs for chemicals have increased 60 to 65%, and our costs for labor have increased 28%. If improved in full, the cost of a gallon of water delivered to your home will be less than a penny per gallon. Customers in Urbana and all over Champaign County believe water is a good value today. Even if fully implemented, the new water rates will still be less than most all utilities in Champaign County. I paid $3 for a gallon of gas today. Even though the cost of water is rising, it will remain a value to residents who live here. Before I open the floor for questions, which is the real purpose of our being here to present to you tonight, I did want to mention, Chairman Roberts, that we plan to leave following the Urbana-Champaign Sanitary District presentation unless there's a need for us to stay to answer any questions later in the agenda. So, or we'll be here obviously before, but we plan to leave after that. So with that, I appreciate your time, and we open the floor to questions you may have.
Are there questions from council? Mayor?
I noticed that you say that water demand in Champaign County has increased by 35% over the last 20 years. What other counties are you serving from these wells in Champaign County?
We ourselves are only serving customers within Champaign County. We do sell water to two sale for resale customers that sell water in Douglas County and Inbral Area Water District, who serves a number of counties south and east of Champaign County. Those growth in sales numbers would include the growth that we've seen in our customers that we serve in Champaign County, including those communities. I can tell you that approximately 93% of the water that we produce and withdraw from the ground stays within the bounds of Champaign County.
So did you say that the 35% included these resales? 35% increase over 20 years, does that include the resales that you do to Douglas County?
It would not include the Inbral Area Water District because they were a customer that came on board after 2000, but it would include Douglas County communities of Tuscola and Arcola.
Okay, and then do you expect to expand in the future to other counties?
We have no plans for expansion to any other counties in the future.
Okay. What rate of return are you expecting on the investment that you're putting into that plant? And what's your, timeline for paying for it?
The rate of return that we've requested is an overall return of 8.29%. That's based on equity return of 11.25%.
And what's the expected life of the plant?
That I'm going to actually defer to Mr. Ruckman with his background in the county. I believe that typically a water treatment plant life, we depreciate the assets that we serve our customers with. That means over time they're worth less value as their useful life expires. And I believe a water treatment plant life, as far as depreciation goes, is either 40 or 50 years. Is that in the ballpark?
I think 50 years is a better rate. Typically, we've got the plant in Urbana that's been in service for probably 100 years. So what typically happens is you end up expanding the plant in Champaign and Urbana. The existing plants we're no longer able to expand, so we build a new plant. But I'm sure the plant will be in production, and we depreciate it, and that's essentially what customers pay for over the depreciable life, approximately.
So your
50 years.
depreciation is over 50 years?
I believe it's 50.
And we'll check that for you and get you
Okay,
an
and then
exact answer.
you have contributed, you said, $600,000 to studying the Muhammad Aquifer. How much have you spent on advertising, even though you are a monopoly?
Well, Mayor Prosing, I don't have the exact number we've spent on advertising. I know what we budget for annual advertising and public relations is a very small portion of what we've spent in terms of studying the Muhammad Aquifer. And some of the advertising that you refer to is covering a period of time where that advertising has not been charged to customers locally. In fact, the majority of the advertising over the last 2 years has been advertising paid for by the owners of American Water, and none of those costs have been passed back to customers in Champaign
Can you tell me what
County.
the total is, please?
I don't have the total we spent
Can
on
you get the
advertising
total?
tonight.
That would be my question.
I will check into that and get back to you.
Okay, thank you.
Are there other questions? Yes, Charlie.
Yeah, I guess a big question is, well, I want to extend one thing that Mayor Pressing said, which is you've had a 35% increase in your customer base, a 35% increase in demand, but a customer base that's gone up by 40%, which suggests that people are using less water per capita.
That is correct.
Okay, so conservation sort of does work over this 20-year period then.
Let me explain, how that has occurred. And I will sit here tonight and tell you that since I came to the water company in 1993, our goal is to provide an ample amount of water to meet our customers' demands. So we have not had a lot of external conservation-oriented programs as a company. And frankly, we haven't had a lot as a community. that are very visible in terms of those that you might see on the West Coast or in Colorado or in other areas where there's water shortages. What represents the change that you happen to notice, and we noticed in Champaign County, and it's not unlike a lot of places in the country, around 1995, the per capita use of water by our customers for the first time since the water system was put in place actually flattened off and began to decline every year. So we see every year a slight decline in the per capita water use, and that's primarily due to efforts that you have had in terms of plumbing codes.
I was going to say the low flush toilets.
It's low flush toilets, shower heads. It's businesses that recycle water for economic reasons, where they maybe didn't in the past. So it's a combination of those kinds of efforts that cause that change.
Okay, now I'm going to try to extend this logically here, and I think you'll see where I'm going. When will the water run out?
Well, right now, the project that we have before you tonight, the water won't run out. We will be able to sustainably use this water treatment plant indefinitely into the future. The purpose of the $600,000 investment and why we've been active in the Muhammad Aquifer Consortium and the Governor's executive order is to answer just that question. And in fact, the project that Brent's group and committee of 12 people, which are 12 different interest areas of stakeholders from across Illinois and the Muhammad Aquifer footprint, is to compare what we say are going to be demands for water to the year 2050, which there's a lot of uncertainty with those demands, to what we think is the available water supply for meeting those demands. And so part of this process is going to give us a tool to use in deciding how we proceed in the future in terms of conservation and water use in Champaign County as well as across East Central Illinois.
Well, don't go away. The real issue to me is water conservation long term. I've heard a rumor attributed to somebody in the system and, that the water will run out in 100 years. Now, I don't know what that was based on, but I can see that happening. I mean, we've seen significant decreases in aquifers in other places. Again, using, essentially this is 40,000-year-old water, and it isn't going to last forever if we keep pumping it out faster than we pump it back in. I'm really disturbed by, and I'm going to bring this up with the sanitation district here in a little bit, the issue that where what we're really doing is we're pumping water out of this aquifer and putting it in other people's watersheds and making no effort to conserve in a real way or to recharge our aquifer. And if we really want it to last, longer than 100 years or whatever, recharging the aquifer is what we really need to be focused on doing. And it turns around. As prices go up, price of gasoline goes up. People tend to conserve. I think a 50% increase in the water bill is a little bit of a shock. You're saying your numbers are going, you're basically saying all your numbers are going up faster than inflation, and it 4.56 when inflation might be 3% a year, compounded, whatever, you're saying it adds up to 52% or 50% or whatever. That's a big chunk of change. Are you asking for the moon here, or are these really numbers that you can stand by in terms of what your real costs are?
We certainly feel they're numbers we can stand by. One thing I did want to point out, because it's important for everyone on the council and our customers, the consumer price index as it applies to the regular consumer is not the same kind of cost that we incur as a utility industry, primarily because of the heavy burden on energy consumption to run pumps and fuel use to provide service, and the treatment chemicals we use for the water treatment process are different. And that's one of the reasons we gauge our performance to a price index for inflation that is true of the sewer and water industry, or the water industry in this case. And that's the number that's about 6% a year. Our costs have increased by 4.5%. And so we've worked hard to keep them at below what the industry's increases have been. And beyond that, the cost that we have for this particular rate increase are not normal. We in Champaign County have not had a project of this magnitude relative to water supply in terms of siting a new treatment plant on a new site since about 1960. And prior to that, 1947, when we first started using water out of the Muhammad Aquifer west of Champaign. And so these are costs that are unusual because the project is something that happens on a very infrequent basis.
Thank you.
Danielle, and then Robert.
I just have about 4 or 5 questions. I'll go through them quickly. The first is this the only water treatment plant that you're building in your service region in Illinois?
I believe that's true. I'm going to have that confirmed by Mr. Ruckman.
It is right now, yes.
This is
It is.
Yes.
You said that you sell water in Douglas County and the Embarrass Water District. Is there any other external to the county place where you sell water from the Muhammad Aquifer?
No, and I would just want to, for a point of clarification, we actually sell the water to them within the county, but it leaves the county, after they take it.
Okay.
And those are the only two. The Tuscola Arcola is actually one entity, and Barraw Area Water District is the second one.
Okay. What was the ROI for the stockholders in 2006?
For Illinois American, I would guess it was, I don't know exactly, but it would have been less than 5%, I'm certain.
It was less than 5%. I was trying to find my notes from the last time that we spoke, and I couldn't, so this number might not be exact, but I know that one of the big issues is that we have a decaying infrastructure that was laid a while ago, and we're getting to the term of that infrastructure. And at the time, I believe you said that we have significant, it depends on what you call significant, we have water loss in the pipes to get it from the aquifer to our homes, something on the order of 30%, I recall.
No. Yeah, I do know that number. Right now, it's approximately 14%.
14%.
And that includes the differences in metering between the meters that we have in our plants and the meters we have in our customers' homes. So water included in that number is water not only that leaks, but water that we can't account for that may be used through a hydrant, where it's not authorized. Okay. And so that's not all water that actually is leaking from pipes.
Okay. And what is your plan for addressing infrastructure and pipe and infrastructure erosion in our community over the next 10 years?
Well, this project is obviously a significant portion of that. When you talk about existing piping, I think that our plan this year and next year are to spend something, I don't have the exact numbers, but between $1 and $2 million on water main replacements in our community. We budget money every year for hydrant replacements, for service line replacements. We're actually in a fairly good condition in Champaign-Urbana when you consider service lines. There's many communities in Illinois and across the country that still have lead service lines in service. We've replaced all of our service lines that had originally been lead with copper, and so we have no lead service lines in the system, but we still do have some older service lines that we replace, and we budget for that annually. The exact number, Councilmember Chenoweth, I'll have to get to you, but that's kind of a snapshot of what we do in terms of replacement.
Okay, that's helpful. And this is my last question. I want you to, in some ways, help me respond to my constituents, because I agree with some of their concerns. What I hear, and I think this is a smart question, is why should we as Urbana residents pay for Champaign sprawl?
And I understand, I've heard that statement before myself, and I've spent some time looking at some of our projects. One thing I can tell you is that there's two pieces to the answer to that question, because there's people, in Champaign or in other places in our service area that may ask the same question about why should I be part of paying for a treatment plant that's going to serve us both now and into the future. One of the answers to that question is that the way our rates are designed and have been designed for a long, long time, decades and decades, is that someone paid for the capacity that you took when you built a new house, when your house was built new. It was that way then, and it is still that way now. So all customers share in the true cost of providing water service. So there isn't a situation where there's a group of customers that bought a treatment plant and that's theirs now, and anybody else that needs water would have to go out and buy another treatment plant to serve them. It's always been that the customers that are existing today, somebody, when they gained water service at their home, paid for the cost of the true cost of providing water, which included additional capacity that allowed that connection to be made. Secondly, the growth numbers in Urbana are actually fairly significant. I took a chance and looked at them relative to the total value of the water main installation versus, Champaign and Urbana, for instance. And about 30% of the total new development that we see in our system is occurring in Urbana. And when you consider the size of Urbana relative to the size of Champaign, it's actually, you're doing pretty well as a community with new development when you consider the proportionate size on a customer or resident, in this case basis, relative to Champaign. We saw about 60% of our value in the years 2005 and 6 of new water main installation projects that we're part of occurred in Champaign. So proportionately, what I would suggest to Urbana is that you are growing, and there's good, examples of that up and down High Cross Road and on North Cunningham Road, and so there has been growth in Urbana, and it continues the way it appears to us.
Thank you.
Robert Lewis.
Yes, I'm just curious. You mentioned in your presentation about the technology that for conservation. That's what I was concerned with. Since it's been such a long time since you built a processing plant for water, will this technology that you plan to implement in the new facility be available to the older facilities?
We're going to be studying that, primarily the piece, and the sanitary district would really appreciate our ability to look at that at our existing facilities. It's not as simple as it sounds because of some EPA guidelines that we have to meet in terms of the new facility, and we can easily do that as we build a new one, but with our existing facilities there will be cost and work associated with making them able to recycle the plant use water. But that is a number that maybe is approximately 2 to 3% of the total water we provide. That's the water we need to treat the water. And right now that water is going to be recycled at our new facility, and that's not water that we're able to recycle at the Urbana facility or at our Champaign facility. And so we are going to look at that, and if it occurs, it will probably occur first at the existing wastewater treatment plant because the volume of water we treat there being about 2.5 times the volume of water we treat in Urbana, and logistics in terms of the ability to get that water back to the treatment train process. In Urbana, right now the lime solids are stored at a location that's not on the plant site. It's located north of the plant site near the corner of Bradley and Lincoln and Goodwin in that area. So the short answer to your question is yes, we're going to look at that at our existing wastewater treatment plant first, and also see if there's possibilities of doing that at our Urbana facility.
The next logical question is, do you see a savings to the customer?
Well, yeah, I wouldn't be able to give you a number on that. I think the most significant impact that has is a savings of water for the aquifer. It's an environmentally sound thing to do. It has a savings on sanitary sewer treatment cost. So indirectly, it may not be a savings that's directly pertained to the water bill, but it would save costs that are associated with the treatment of that water by the Urbana-Champaign Sanitary District.
I have a question, I guess, for you. Is all the water that is brought forward from for the customers from the Illinois American Water Company, do they all come from deep wells, or is there surface catchment or surface takeoff?
No, in fact, they all do come from what sometimes we consider to be deep wells in Champaign County. If we mention that in front of our friends at the State Water Survey or State Geological Survey, we're reminded that in reality our aquifers are fairly shallow. So technically they're shallow, but they're between 200 and 350 feet deep, say. It gives you kind of a rough feel for the depth from which we draw water. I don't know the exact number right off the top of my head, but we actually, it's hard to imagine, but in Champaign County, we sit kind of at the headlands of a number of different watersheds for drainage. And so there's really not a significant surface water supply anywhere near here that we could use to as a source of supply for surface water, removal. And there's really not any topography available to properly build a reservoir or a lake like Springfield has or Decatur has. There's really not something like that available for us in Champaign County. So we're very fortunate to have the two aquifers that we get our supply from, which are the Glassford and Mahomet Aquifer.
The southeast corner of Champaign County doesn't have the Mahomet Aquifer running through it. It looks like that from your map that the aquifer's edge actually almost is like goes right down Wright Street between the two cities, and then also loops out and passes the Savoy area. Is there a different water source to the south and east of the Mahomet Aquifer that, and are you allowed by the state? I guess the state would be a guardian of water digging rights, I suppose. Are you allowed to tap into other aquifer systems besides the ones you mentioned? Do you have wells in other locations?
We don't. Our wells, the majority of our wells on the west edge of Champaign, in fact, about half of those wells are within city limits today. About half are outside city limits. One of the things we found is that that edge you talk about that kind of goes down Wright Street, we're like, I don't want to call it a beach, but as the aquifer comes to that edge it gets very thin, and so we've actually come to the scientific conclusion that we need to move farther out into the aquifer to make sure that it is sustainable to withdraw water at the rate that we're going to need to meet our demands over time. So we don't have any wells that are outside the Mahomet Aquifer. The other answers to your question are there are issues, and maybe you've read about them over time, but some communities to the south and east have had significant issues with water supply. They're smaller communities than ours, but even with their small size, they've been unable to really locate very close by adequate source of groundwater, and some of them have had to pipe as many as 6 or 7 miles to find a location for a well that even at that location is limited but enough to supply them. So that's kind of where the water supply for those communities comes from. Of course, we serve St. Joe, which is east of here, as customers, in Sydney and Philo are communities that buy water from us, sale for resale, we call it, or wholesale. Beyond that, you asked a question about whether it's legal. It certainly is legal for us to build wells in other aquifers or to pipe water further and bring it back to Champaign-Urbana for our customers. That is legal. As you might imagine, it's very expensive. And so we look hard to find the closest effective way to provide water for the customers, because the piping costs and the pumping, the energy it takes to move water that long a distance because of its mass becomes very expensive.
Are there other questions? Okay, well, I guess that's the end of your presentation.
We appreciate it, and once again, if something comes to mind that you didn't get to ask, you know where we work, and you have our contact information, so we welcome any other questions.
Okay,
thank you.
Barry. This is being followed now by a presentation from the Sanitary District. Who'd like to step forward for that presentation? Please address the council and identify yourself.
Yes, I'm Michael Little. I'm the Executive Director of the Urbana-Champaign Sanitary District. Also with me tonight is Chris Alex, who's the President of the Board of Trustees of the Sanitary District. And if you'll bear with me for a second while I find just some visual aids here to help a little bit for me to follow my notes as well. I appreciate the opportunity to present before you tonight. Our purpose in being here is to give you an update on the Sanitary District's long-range planning process. As you may know, a number of years ago, back about 1999, the district entered into a long-range planning process that took several years to complete, and we are now in the process of updating that. So I wanted to take this opportunity to bring you that information, give you a report on the outcome of the projects that we did as a result of that original planning effort, and then to bring you up to date on the refreshment of that plan, if it were. First of all, I wanted to give you a little bit of information about the sanitary district. The district serves the communities of Champaign-Urbana, Savoy, the University of Illinois, and some outlying areas of Champaign County that have sanitary sewers. Very small amount of area. Approximately 134,000 people get wastewater service from the district. We have 2 treatment plants. The smaller plant located in southwest Champaign, the Southwest plant, which serves West Champaign and the village of Savoy, has a capacity of 8 billion gallons per day. The Northeast plant, which is located in Northeast Urbana, has a capacity of about 17.3 million gallons a day and serves the east portion of Champaign, the University of Illinois, and all of Urbana. District has 51 employees. We have a annual budget of about $13.5–14 million a year. And as I mentioned, starting back in 1999, the district began a planning process to look at long-term needs for the community. Prior to that, the district had done no long-range planning for almost 25 years, and so it was time to get that effort underway, certainly. There were a number of driving factors at that time. The Southwest treatment plant was at capacity and needed upgrading and expansion. There were a number of issues that needed to be addressed at the Northeast plant as well, in terms of what we term the biosolids handling facilities and energy management to improve our energy efficiency, and also a project to update and improve how we use methane gas in terms of a cogeneration project. And that was what was termed the 2005 improvements. Because of the significance and the magnitude of the improvements that were identified in that facilities planning effort that was completed in 2002, it was deemed necessary to divide those projects into a series of large projects, one to be completed in 2005, a second project in 2010, and a third project in 2015. The 2010 project would involve major upgrade improvements at the Northeast plant, and the 2015 project would complete those upgrade improvements. The 2005 improvements projects, which was completed in 2005, at the Southwest plant involved, as I said, expansion of that facility from a capacity of 6 million gallons per day to 8 million gallons per day, which involved a complete new headworks and preliminary treatment system, replacement of our tertiary filters, which is the final stage in the treatment process, a plant-wide SCADA system, which is a supervisory control and data acquisition system, a consolidated solids handling at the Northeast plant, and I'll go into that a little bit more in a minute. And the total cost of that project was $25 million. This is an overview, an aerial view of the Southwest plant as it exists today. I'm happy to report that it operates very, very well. We're very pleased with the technologies that we invested in there, and that facility is really a showpiece for us. This is just a picture of the headworks facility, and the reason I illustrate these is because I'll talk about them more in relationship to the Northeast plant and the improvements that we'll make there. But this is where all the wastewater comes into the facility initially and receives preliminary treatment. It's a totally enclosed facility with odor control equipment on it, which I'm sure is important to our neighbors. These are the tertiary filters that I mentioned earlier. This is new technology in tertiary filtration, vastly improved over the types of equipment that we had at the Southwest plant and still have at the Northeast plant. Missed a slide. This is the consolidation of the solids handling facilities at Southwest. We eliminated duplication of a lot of equipment that we had at both treatment plants, and we consolidated that at the Northeast treatment plant. and I'll go into that, as I said, in just a minute. At the Northeast plant, we installed new equipment to improve our solids handling capabilities. Won't go into a lot of detail about what those things stand for there, but suffice it to say that it's new technology to allow us to better handle and treat the biosolids side of things, and that's the byproduct of the treatment process. We divide our plant into two components, the flow side and the solid side. The flow side is where we treat the wastewater, bring it to a level of purity where we can discharge it, but the byproduct of that treatment process are solids that are produced that we have to get out of the system. And what we do in the solids handling side of things is we take those solids, we put them into treatment units that are called anaerobic digesters, and we stabilize them, reduce their volume, and in the process produce methane gas. We capture and store that methane gas, and we use it to run engine generators, which are part of the project we constructed in 2005, that generate about 40% of our electrical needs at the Northeast plant. We also replaced our blowers and aeration system in Northeast with much higher efficiency units that use a lot less horsepower to provide the treatment process. We installed a SCADA system on the solid side of the plant and invested about $20 million in the Northeast plant. This is a view of our Northeast plant. This facility is much older. It goes back much further. It was the original Urbana-Champaign treatment facility. It was constructed originally in 1923. It has been added to and expanded more times than I can count in the intervening times. But suffice it to say that it does provide the highest level of treatment that is required anywhere in the state of Illinois. So at our treatment facilities here, we have the most stringent standards, discharge standards, basically of anywhere.
Michael, what is the location of that plant?
It's just off of University Avenue, right behind Ambucks Park.
Okay.
Some of the new equipment we installed, as I mentioned, these are the gravity belt thickeners. These are solid bowl centrifuges that we use to dewater the solids. I'll point out that all of the material that we recover out of that solids handling process, besides producing the beneficial methane gas, we recover all of the solids and we beneficially reuse those as well. Typically, it's land application to farmland. It's very rich in fertilizer nutrients, and it also is a soil amendment in that it returns material to the soil that's very beneficial. But actually, right now, all of that material is going down to reclamation of a mine site, one of the Murdoch mine sites just east of Tuscola. So a company is reclaiming that land and is using the biosolids from our facilities, as well as some water plant materials from other locations to reclaim that soil and return it to a useful state. These are the engine generators that I mentioned that we use. We burn methane gas in these. As I said, produce about 40% of our electricity. We recover all of the heat off of the engine jackets and also the exhaust silencers, and we use that heat to heat the digesters that break down the solids that produce the methane. This is just a view of the central control at the Northeast plant, showing the SCADA systems that I mentioned. Our Southwest plant is only manned 8 hours a day, 5 days a week, but it is monitored 24 hours a day from the Northeast plant, which is manned around the clock. So we have operators throughout all shifts at the Northeast plant, and they can see every single thing that's going on at the Southwest plant via the SCADA system. And there's a whole series of alarms and alerts that tell them if there's any problems, and if there's an issue, then we dispatch someone to Southwest to take care of it. That's worked out very, very well. In a typical year's time, over a year, we typically only have 25 to 30 dispatches to the Southwest in off hours, which would be weekends and anytime, after 5 o'clock and before 8 o'clock. Now getting to the real point of this presentation is to talk about the update of that long-range facilities plan. When the district did the plan originally and completed it in 2002, we knew that it needed to be a living document, something that would get refreshed and updated on a routine basis every 5 years, as a matter of fact. And so we knew going into 2006 that we needed to get on that process in 2007 and update that document so that we were sure that we stayed ahead of the curve, so to speak, in terms of identifying the needs of the community for wastewater treatment. Here is the basic tasks in the 2007 update. We wanted to update the Southwest plant population flow and load projections to make sure that the basis that we used to expand that plant still held true, and that we still had a facility that was adequate out to the projected design life of the facility, which is about 2020. We wanted to fully evaluate the Northeast treatment plant hydraulic and unit process capacities to make sure that we knew exactly how much capacity we had in the Northeast plant. And then correspondingly, we wanted to look in detail at the population flows and loads, both existing and future, at the Northeast plant, so we could project the useful life of the Northeast plant in terms of capacity. We wanted to evaluate any alternatives where improvements were needed, and then recommend improvements and develop an implementation plan. So those were the basic tasks of the 2007 update. We had consultants, Concert Townsend and Viridine engineers out of Chicago were the consultants on the plan update. They were the consultants that prepared the original plan back in 2002. They were also the designers of the 2005 improvements of both Northeast and Southwest plant. We gave them certain objectives when we started into the update. We wanted to optimize the existing plant without major expansion. We wanted to treat as much flow as possible within the existing infrastructure. We needed to address some high priority operation and maintenance issues and also aging infrastructure within the treatment plant. We wanted as much as possible standardized equipment between the Northeast plant and the Southwest plant. And we also needed to meet a May 1st, 2009 disinfection deadline for our Northeast plant. In the reissuance of our discharge permit for the Northeast plant, the sanitary district will now be required to disinfect the effluent from that treatment plant on a seasonal basis from May 1 until October 30th each year. And so we have to be ready to do that starting on May 1, 2009. At the present time, both district treatment plants have chlorination exemptions, year-round chlorination exemptions. We also wanted to provide flexibility for future permit requirements. In other words, we wanted anything we did in our planning, we wanted to make sure that we were still flexible to meet changes in standards. I can tell you that while wastewater treatment's been around a long time, the standards that we are required to meet are constantly changing and getting more stringent, and they will continue to do that. We also wanted to provide facilities to minimize and contain any possible plant bypasses, or to make the plants as reliable as we possibly can in terms of controlling treatment. Here's the basic summary of the findings of that update. The 2006 population served, as I said, is about 134,000. The projected 2026 population that we'll be serving is 165,000. The Southwest plant capacity is adequate to at least 2020, and that will be revisited again at the next long-range plan update. The Northeast plant capacity is adequate to up to 2026. So that means that by 2026 it will have to be expanded. Obviously, we want to expand it before we need the expansion, not run up against the ultimate deadline. Here are the recommended improvements at the Northeast plant. As I mentioned, at the Southwest plant, we want to improve those headworks facilities. I showed you that headworks building at Southwest. We want to build a new modern headworks facility, totally enclosed with odor control. We want to expand our stormwater pumping and clarification capacity. We need to replace our existing tertiary filters. I showed you the technology that we used at Southwest. That's what we want to use at Northeast. We need to construct some additional digester capacity. We badly need to upgrade our employee facilities. As I said, the plant was originally constructed in 1923. We're still using some of those 1923 facilities. Our employee facilities are kind of hit and miss and scattered around the plant, and they deserve better than that. And so we want to do a major upgrade of the employee facilities. We need to rehabilitate one of those 1923 structures, what we call Station A. It was built in 1923, and we're using it as we speak. We have some site items, some infrastructure needs that we need to address, and some needs assessment items. And then, of course, we have to install a disinfection system in Northeast. These are the existing headworks at the Northeast plant. One of those tanks was built in the 1930s. The other was built about 1980. Again, this is the headworks facility at Southwest, and that's the type of facility we plan to build at Northeast. These are the screens inside that facility, totally contained at Southwest. These are the existing tertiary filters that I mentioned that were put in about 1980. They are well past their useful life in terms of serviceability. They require a tremendous amount of maintenance. They are steel boxes that require ongoing maintenance, and their serviceability is dramatically reduced from when they were originally constructed. Again, another shot of the Southwest plant filters showing the new technology, what is called disc filters. It's a much higher rate filtration system, far fewer moving parts, much more reliable system, and a very low maintenance and low utility electricity usage for these filters. Here's the cost estimate for the project. I won't go through all the details there. The total bottom line is $35.7 million improvements at the Southwest plant. The $700,000 disinfection project is a project that we're going to do in-house with reserve funds, but the $35.7 million project we plan to do through a low-interest loan through the state revolving fund that's administered by the Illinois EPA. That's a source of financing that's available to municipalities. It's a subsidized low-interest loan, between 2.5 and 3%. It's by far the most economical mechanism available to us to fund that project, and it allows us to finance it over a 20-year period, which is the design life of the treatment facilities. The implementation schedule for the project, the Northeast Plant Disinfection Project, we've completed design, as a matter of fact. We're just reviewing those final design documents right now with anticipation that we'll put that project out to bid shortly after the first of the year and have construction complete in March of 2009. The 2010 improvements, which consist of all of the improvements, all of the remaining recommended improvements necessary at the Northeast plant. And if you'll remember back to the results of the 2002 project, there were 3 stages of projects: 2005, 2010, 2015. We feel we're able to pull the 2010 and 2015 project into one, do all of that work in one final project that should bring the sanitary district treatment facilities up to date and serve us well for the next 20 years. Design on that project began in May of this year, and we look for construction to be completed in May of 2011. As I mentioned, the $35.7 million project will be funded through a low-interest loan. However, of course, we have to pay that loan back, and we have to pay it back with interest. There are 2 major funds within the sanitary district financing that we use to take care of all of our costs of operation and maintenance. The first is the Operation and Maintenance Fund. That fund is funded through user fees. So the fees that each user of the system pays on a bi-monthly basis go into the Operation and Maintenance Fund. That pays for the day-to-day costs of operating and maintaining facilities. It pays for the cost of rehabilitating facilities. So once equipment reaches the point where it has to be replaced, we call that rehabilitation, and it pays for all of the cost of rehabilitating those existing facilities. The second funding mechanism is through the construction fund, and the construction fund is funded through connection fees. So anytime a new property wants to connect to the sanitary sewer, they're required to pay a connection fee. Those connection fees are used strictly for the payment of expansion of treatment facilities. So we have the Operation Maintenance Fund through user fees, the construction fund through connection fees. We took each component of the 2010 project, each of the recommended improvements that are necessary, and we evaluated each of those to determine how much of each of those components was chargeable to rehabilitation and how much was chargeable to expansion. About $24.4 million of $35.7 million comes under the category of rehabilitation. about $11.3 million of that is attributable to expansion. As I mentioned before, the hydraulic capacity, the treatment capacity of the plant is adequate to 2026, but there are certain components within the plant that need to be expanded. And I mentioned the digestion facilities. Certain components within the headworks facility are expansion related as well. So how are we going to pay for $35.7 million in borrowing? The district has gone through and developed a financial model to project income and expenses going out into the future to pay for the rehabilitation portion of the project, the $24.4 million. We're proposing to increase rates 3% a year for 9 years, starting in 2008. So that means that the current fee for wastewater treatment, which is $1.38 per unit, and a unit is about 750 gallons, that $1.38 will increase to $1.80 per unit after each of those 9 3% increases goes into effect. So by 2016, the rate per unit will be $1.80. That's an increase in the average homeowner's monthly bill of $3.15 by 2016. So it'll go up a few cents a year each year. It'll reach $3.15 a month in 2016. The connection fee, as I mentioned, which finances the expansion portion of the project, is currently $305 per population equivalent. A population equivalent is 100 gallons of flow. A single-family residence, as an example, is 3.5 population equivalent. So that we're proposing to raise that $305 fee, $25 in 2009, and again $25 in 2010. So after 2010, the fee will be $355 per PE. The effect on a single-family residence is that the connection fee will go from $1,067.50 to a future fee of $1,242.50, or an increase of $175 by 2010, and then we're not projecting any other increases in that connection fee. And that concludes my presentation, and I would be happy to entertain any questions.
Are there any questions for Mike Little or Chris Alex from council? Yes, okay, Mayor.
I took a tour of your Northeast plant with the League of Women Voters, and I would encourage the council, maybe we could get something like that. It seems like a very well-run operation.
Thank you.
It's really impressive that you're using the methane to do the electricity. And I'm very impressed with the fact that you can put out the financial information for everybody to see and understand.
Thank you. And the other thing that strikes people is they usually come through the tour and they say, "Where are the chemicals? Where are all the chemicals that you use?" We don't use any chemicals in the treatment process. It's all natural processes. We just help it along and encourage it.
Yes, Danielle.
Just a quick question, because sometimes I get asked this question. Are there waste toxins, things that residents throw down their sinks that make it difficult or impossible for you to remove them? Since we have you before us today, and that question comes up sometimes.
That's a kind of a touchy subject. Yes, there are things that people can put down the toilet, down the sink, that are detrimental to the treatment process. However, the quantities are so small that we don't really see that effect. You know, things like strong bleach or caustics, you know, typical cleaning products. If you were to, you know, put them in huge quantities, yes, they could inhibit our treatment process. But homeowner chemicals are relatively weak in nature, and just by the quantities, it's very small quantities. So while the chemical itself could be inhibitory, the volumes and the quantities are not.
I guess I'd follow up to that by saying that we do have some, we don't have a lot of heavy industry in Champaign-Urbana, as you know, but we do have some industrial customers, and a lot of the waste that they discharge are things that are compatible with the well, everything we allow them to discharge is compatible with the treatment process. But in some cases, we do have those industrial users have a pre-treatment plan of their own to ensure that the waste is compatible with what we can treat by the time it leaves their facility and enters into the sewer system.
Okay. Just a comment as food for thought, and I have to bring it up because my father's a methane expert. If he was here, he would say that converting methane to electricity is extremely lossy, and you lose about 70% of your energy doing that. And so one thing to think about as you go into the future, it's great that you're recycling with the 40%. And I think when you came before the council in 2001, we talked methane and anaerobic digesters and things like that, and it's really great to see that state-of-the-art technology used. But one thing to consider is to actually use the methane for heating purposes of the building or for heat treatment instead of the conversion to electricity, because you could probably actually decrease your energy costs even further if you were able to just use the methane in gas form.
Well, the thing we do, though, is we recover that heat off the engines. We have a total heat recovery system, so even the engine jacket heat as well as the exhaust silencer heat, we recover that and we use that to heat the digester. So we don't have any external energy inputs to keep our digesters at about 100 degrees. Now, in the last few weeks, we haven't needed a lot of that heat, but I can assure you that the rest of the year it goes to good use. That's a good point, and we're always looking for ways to improve our energy efficiency. But because of the mutual needs of the amount of heat that we need, especially in the wintertime, and then with what's happened with utility costs, it works to our advantage that way. But we're always looking for better ways to do it.
Yes, Charlie?
A couple of quick questions here. How much did you say that the expansion from 6 million to 8 million gallons per day of the Champaign Southwest plant cost?
Well, the total project was 25 million. The expansion portion, I don't remember the numbers precisely off the top of my head, but the expansion portion of that was about 10 million.
Okay, so
and the rehabilitation was 15.
Rehab was a big piece of that.
Yes,
okay,
just like it is here at the Northeast.
Yeah, I guess I'm really surprised that only 2 million gallons a day was sufficient to keep the capacity. I'm finding that number hard to believe, but.
Well, one thing, wastewater treatment, and Barry mentioned this as well, the amounts of flow that we see coming from newer sewer systems is significantly less than the amounts of flow that come from the older sewer systems.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
So new tight sewers, good municipal inspection of service lines to homes, water-saving facilities in homes, because basically anything you buy today is a water conserving, unless you take the little washers out.
Okay.
Defeat the purpose. But we see much lower flows associated with the growth.
Okay. One of the big questions I have, and this came up in the discussion of ethanol plants too, was the reuse of water before it gets dumped in watersheds. How much more treatment would you need to do to your water to make it of sufficient quality for somebody like an ethanol plant to use it?
And I had conversations with the Andersons about that, trying to promote the reuse of our effluent from our Southwest plant. For their cooling water uses, essentially none.
Okay.
The quality of our effluent, of course, it's good Illinois American water, a lot of it, when it comes to us, and we take out about 98 to 98.5% of everything that was in it that shouldn't be in it. And so the quality of the water for cooling purposes is adequate. However, it was my understanding that for the actual methanol production, it has to be much more pure than that. So it would have to go through, and they're actually using reverse osmosis as their treatment process prior to the going into the ethanol production.
Could they use reverse osmosis on the 98.5% pure water that you've got? So they could be using the same process regardless.
Yes.
Okay, that's an interesting comment. Of course, the other one, of course, which I brought up with Barry, is my concern that long term we need to be looking at recharging the Mahomet Aquifer, and I don't know if that's even in consideration, but I would like to see, if you haven't started thinking about that, how you would do it. I think long-term, I think that's something we're going to need to address. The study, of course, that Barry alluded to is a big component of that, but I don't, it really bothers me that we're dumping this great water, essentially, after it's treated, into two different watersheds, not back into our own in some way, and it seems like a real waste, and we should be reusing as much of this water as we can before it goes out of the system, even into the ground as a recharge.
I would agree with both of those, and we as a board and I individually certainly encourage the district to communicate with the Andersons. In fact, after a discussion at one point with Mayor Pressing and I discussed this, to see whether we could convince them to use some of our effluent, because it's geographically convenient, and obviously the extent to which we can reuse that, every gallon of our water that can be reused is water that doesn't come out of the aquifer. And as you correctly discerned, in general, I think we typically improve the quality of the surface streams by dumping the water in, because as you point out, this is primarily aquifer water that we're dumping, right, with perhaps some things introduced in household use that have largely been removed during the treatment plant. So I think to the extent that we can encourage and we can work with local governments to encourage permitting and approval of these plants to build into that process, at least bringing them to the table to look at these kind of reuse issues, I would certainly confirm that.
Yeah, well, it really bothers me that, we're basically flushing this great water away, and other people are finding it perfectly good to drink. So,
yeah, well,
I mean,
the board shares the board of trustees shares your opinion on both issues. With regard to aquifer recharge, that's something that there is some attention being paid to in the wastewater industry, not necessarily here. Obviously, there are areas of the country which are in much more dire straits, the desert Southwest, most notably, where they are very concerned about being able to keep their aquifers from running dry. And this is something that that as an industry, I think, is being looked at, but that we'd probably have to know a little more in terms of the needs and the economics of the situation before we commit to that.
And economics is really the driving factor. Right, wrong, or otherwise, water from the Mahomet aquifer system is relatively cheap to acquire right now. That doesn't make it right, but there are a number of uses that our effluent could replace very easily. However, if you look at the economies, trying to do that, in other words, trying to distribute the plant effluent to those locations, it's not economically viable to those locations. They can drill a well and take water out of the aquifer cheaper than we can build pipelines and pump the water.
So 5 miles of pipeline due north to Anderson's is more expensive than taking water out of the ground.
Well, I won't argue that point. I won't necessarily say that was one of those cases. I'm talking about some of the other irrigation uses, some of the very typical uses for plant effluent. There's a lot of water used in this area for irrigation. It's come straight out of the Mahomet Valley, and that could be replaced by plant effluent. The problem is getting the effluent to those locations, which are relatively remote, is more expensive than drilling a well.
Okay, thank you.
Robert.
Well, I want to thank you for your presentation. I thought it was wonderful to see the kind of planning that went through this whole process. You mentioned one thing that kind of, as I think through it, the EPA comes up with all kinds of neat stuff down the road. Do you see anything immediate within the next couple of years that you're going to have to address that could impact your facilities?
Not within the next couple of years, but long term, yes. There are going to be the next major impact on wastewater treatment will be the issue of nutrients, both phosphorus and nitrogen.
Okay.
Currently, the district's southwest plant removes phosphorus because of the watershed that we discharge to. We discharge to the Kaskaskia system, which goes to Lake Shelbyville. So we've been required to remove phosphorus at that treatment facility since 1982. We're not required to remove phosphorus currently at the Northeast plant. However, when that plant is expanded, and I say when, someday it will be expanded, current EPA regulations will require, as part of that expansion, that phosphorus removal be undertaken in the Northeast. Now, we don't have any plans to expand that plant until as we approach that 2026 deadline that we're projecting right now. However, we do know that phosphorus removal will be a requirement whenever that plant is expanded. And that goes back to one of the goals that I mentioned, objectives, was to stay flexible so that we could meet those future requirements. Phosphorus removal is relatively easy to do. We used to do it with chemical addition at the Southwest plant. With the 2005 improvements, we changed to biological nutrient removal, biological phosphorus removal. So we're now doing that with a purely biological process, which has advantages over the chemical process, obviously. Either one of those two processes, chemical or biological, can be implemented at the Northeast plant with very minor changes. The other big issue, though, is nitrates. Right now, we remove ammonia nitrogen. Ammonia nitrogen is toxic to fish. You probably all remember 2002 and the ammonia release. Ammonia in high enough concentrations is toxic to aquatic life. So our treatment plants are designed to remove the ammonia, and we do a very good job of it as long as we get it in the proper quantities. But we only convert ammonia nitrogen to nitrate nitrogen. There's no standard for nitrate nitrogen. But nitrates are also beneficial nutrients to aquatic, certain forms of aquatic life, which are not necessarily the best things in the ecosystem for fish. In other words, it promotes algae, it promotes the growth of other aquatic plants that can rob the oxygen out of the aquatic system. And so eventually there will be nitrate standards as well as part of those total nutrient standards. And when that happens, then there will need to be some changes made at both treatment plants. But we are anticipating that as well. There's nothing we're doing right now that will allow us to remove nitrates. However, we are already planning and thinking about how those new additional treatment processes can be added to the plants.
Any further comments here from the council? Mr. Bill.
If I could ask Mike to just do a very brief update on where we are with our collection expansion east part of Urbana, $8 billion project. I just thought take this opportunity to do a quick update.
Sure. As you know, we're doing a cooperative project with the city of Urbana to expand collection system capacity to about 3,500 acres, between 3,000 and 3,500 acres of land east of High Cross Road, basically from 150 south. And that project is in design right now. That will be a state revolving fund project as well. The district is acting as the contracting authority, and we will acquire the loan from the Illinois EPA. We anticipate that we'll be in line to do that next spring, in May or June of next year. And with any luck, we'll be able to acquire that loan in our own time frames and not theirs. It doesn't always work that way, but we have our schedule set so we can be ready for a loan in that May-June time frame. And if that all goes according to plan, then we'll have the project under construction middle to late next summer, and with the anticipation that it'll be completed in about 15 to 18 months after that.
Yes, but Brandon.
Yeah, I just wanted to thank you for the presentation and just make sure I understood some of what I was hearing right. It sounds like the expansion project is about a $40 million project.
35.7.
Plans. And I know, I'm thinking, compare this to the water company presentation we heard earlier. I think their project was about $50 million. And I wanted to make sure I heard right. You're only funding this through rate increases will be something like 3% over the next 9 years. And that's all the funding, right? We don't have a 50% rate increase or 60% coming anywhere along the way.
No balloon out there 4 or 5 years.
Okay.
And I can explain. One thing I did not mention that I was remiss in, was that you'll recall there were some fairly significant rate increases the district put into place over past years. We went through about a 30% rate increase staged over several years. That was completed in 2006. Those rates, we have found, did what we had hoped it would do. It obviously is covering the cost of the $45 million we borrowed as part of the 2005 improvements, but we were also hoping that those rates would produce a portion of the needs for the 2010 project so that we wouldn't have to continually be raising rates in large chunks. We have been able, through economy, we have been able to put aside $10 million that we have now pledged to the 2010 project. It will be part of the debt retirement of the 2010 project. But we can earn in the neighborhood of 5+% on that money, and we can borrow money for between 2.5% and 3%. So we will not take that $10 million and pay off the construction at the time it occurs. We'll use it as pledged debt retirement against the $35.7 million. The interest that it earns will also go towards the debt retirement. So not only do we have the rate increases, but we have $10 million already in place to use to offset those possible larger rate increases.
Okay, thanks. I think, 3% a year over some period of time, that's barely over inflation, and I think that's a lot more acceptable to my constituents and to the customers here than, for example, the other project we heard about tonight that has a really large jump. So I thank you for that. I think you've always been good stewards and really professional. And to me, it just underscores how, we can locally have water utilities that are really professional and really high quality, and I think you've continued to do that over many years, so thank you very much.
Thank you.
I would add one caveat to that, Brandon, which is this is a long-range plan, and as you know, with your comprehensive plans and long-range planning efforts at the city level, it's impossible to predict every contingency. So one of our significant inputs to our process is energy, of course, and we've been able to reduce that by some of the things that Mike has pointed out during the presentation, more efficient treatment processes, which are in use at the Southwest plant and will be brought to the Northeast plant as well. Some of these cogeneration efforts where we're able to generate some of our own electricity, which has been a pretty significant cost savings for us over the long term. But of course, and we've been able to reduce headcount and be able to do things, creative applications of technology to, for example, reduce the number of hours that we have to staff the Southwest plant and things like that. But we don't have a crystal ball, so in the extent that energy costs begin to balloon as the energy market becomes tight, or healthcare costs begin to spiral out of control or something, there's certainly unexpected contingencies. But in general, we have to look, as you do, at the big picture. And I certainly concur with what Mike said, that I think that this level of rate increase puts us in a financial position where we'll certainly be able to accommodate the changes that we anticipate coming down the pipe.
Obviously, our models all have assumptions in them, many assumptions, but they're based upon, based upon a conservative look at past experience. So we don't look at the growth in the last 4 or 5 years and say that's going to happen forever. However, we do use growth as part of that, and that's part of the reason that I've had the question asked, well, how can you only have a 3% increase pay for this project and you have increasing costs? Well, there's growth factors involved. The community is growing, and assuming that it continues to grow at a modest rate, we project a 1% per year population growth, and that's built into our model. That's historically what's happened over a significantly long period of time. We feel significantly long period of time. But again, as Chris pointed out, our crystal ball isn't any better than most others, and so things can happen that can cause reversals in those models. But we've tried to be conservative and not over-project how much, for instance, on interest income, because interest income can go back down to where it was. I'm sure this council is aware of where interest rates were a few years ago, and it can go back down to there. So we're trying to be conservative and not say, well, we're always going to get 5% or 6% or something like that. So we're trying to use conservative numbers in making those projections.
Okay. The next presentation.
Demolition review for protecting historic resources, and I believe we have a presentation here.
It's actually the brochure on the Royer Architectural District.
Okay, all right.
That's what we're here for.
All right, so would you guys, Dennis, why don't you introduce who's with you, and why don't you go ahead and give us a presentation?
Okay, I'm Dennis Roberts. I live at 507 East Green Street, and this is Ilona Matkovsky, an architect. Why don't you tell you where you live? At where?
412 West Elm Street in Urbana, and I'm an archaeologist, and I also do architectural historic work at the Public Service Archaeology Program at the University of Illinois.
We met at a home historic research class that was held at the public library that Ilona taught. I was a class member. I got interested in historic research because Ilona is really excellent at it. And very soon after I took the class, I was thinking about researching my own home. We found out that they had just discovered that there was a significant and hereto unknown Royer structure, a residence, and it was right across the street from me all this time. And I'd always looked at that house and I thought, what a great looking house that is. And when we found out that it was actually designed by the foremost architect at the turn of the century in Urbana, and it was in still fairly good condition, we were amazed. Well, then right after that, there was the issue of the demolition on East Elm Street at 502 and 504. Two very beautiful mansions, you could call them, on Elm Street, and one of them was a Royer home. Looking at the entire picture of how homes were sort of endangered and how they were, we had undiscovered gems of architecture in our community, we had some discussions. Ilona had thought about how we can utilize this knowledge both to celebrate the existence of these individual dwellings and businesses and use them as a magnet and a draw for the city of Urbana and the downtown and the near neighborhood areas. In conjunction with Ilona's research, she had come up with basically the history of 13 different former residences, offices, businesses that were designed by Joseph W. Royer, and we marked them on a map. We realized that they laid in a district that covered the downtown and stretched into both the east and the west Urbana neighborhoods. Many people think of the west Urbana neighborhoods as having many significant architectural treasures, historic homes, but they often have no realization that there are interesting homes and of historic value in the east neighborhood as well. So we thought that if we put together a brochure or a pamphlet that explained how indeed it's true that there are these beautiful and historic buildings spread across the width of Urbana, and if we could draw attention to them, it would be a wonderful economic tool. It would boost interest in our town from all people who are interested in observing and looking at homes and the history of our city, and it would help us to reacquaint ourselves with our own history, which really had been lost in a great extent. So, Ilona, do you want to explain a little bit about the intent of the map and what you were hoping to achieve by drawing attention to all this? You've all seen a mock-up, or you've received a copy of the brochure that we have drafted as. What we realize is it's one thing to talk and have an idea about something, but without anything physical, concrete to look at and to observe it, it's just like a mind thought, and it has no life. And so we tried to bring it into some kind of embodiment, and that's how I got involved, because I can embody things fairly easily in the graphic sense. And so I was basically requested to help on this project, and I said, well, I think it's an important one. It might benefit the city, and that's how I got involved.
Well, I believe that creating a district, which I would like to emphasize, we don't want to be a historic district. We want it to be just a special district, and we called it an architectural district in recognition of the exceptional contributions that Joseph Royer made to the architecture of this area and of the whole city. We would like to have a district designated in this area where his buildings are concentrated and where other very important buildings are concentrated in order to have a focus to renovation, restoration, beautification, business development, education in the city. Right now, so many of the old buildings have been destroyed in downtown Urbana that there's no real coherence to the downtown area architecturally. But if we designate this district as an architectural district after Joseph Royer, that will bring coherence to it. We will focus on a famous architect and we will focus on his works. In addition to focusing on local education, renovation, historic preservation, business investment, this would also provide an excellent promotional tool for the city. The city could advertise it for businesses, for the university, provide the brochures for these organizations. It could create a tourist destination, promote business development in downtown, and also provide rationale for funding requests and grant proposals for the development of this district. Without such a district or such a focus, it's hard to get money to do anything. I would also like to point out what this area is not. I would like to emphasize this is not a walking tour what we are proposing. This is a concept what we are proposing, a concept of a district to focus attention on an area. People should walk the area and are welcome to walk the area, but the idea is not a walking tour here. This district is not proposed to be historic. We do not want the restrictions on it. All we want is to create focus, not restrictions. Focus, attention, which the buildings and the areas that we are talking about have not received. There have been some concerns about the use of the word district, and I'd like to dwell on it just for a second. There's a concern that using the word architectural district will people confuse this term with historic district. I believe that people understand that there are many uses of the word district. There are architectural districts, historic districts, entertainment districts, shopping districts, voting districts, school districts, and people are perfectly capable of distinguishing among these districts. They will not confuse them just because the word district is in them. I think we should assume that people have enough intelligence, especially if it's explained to them that this is this type of district and not that type of district, that they will not confuse the two. I like the word district because it's a very definite designation of a geographical area. Area is too vague. Tour, it is not a tour. As I said, it's a very bad word. Walk is a very bad word. It's not a walk. So I recommend that the word district be retained because I think that's the best that expresses what this whole proposal is about. Thank you.
Maybe I'll just have one more thing to say a little bit. We did create a brochure, and you may think, okay, this is looks so much like perhaps what the Historic Preservation Commission would put forward. And out of respect to the Historic Preservation Commission, we did present this brochure to them. And they did, you can read the minutes of their meeting. They did talk about some issues about it, some issues concerning specific, perhaps, questions that they didn't enumerate them, but, about specificity about maybe a historic fact or something in the write-up of the materials. And we're totally open for, editing and improvements in that line. We really see this as being an economic promotional tool for the city of Urbana, a focal point, and also it would allow a certain different kind of fundraising and grant proposal request writing to bring additional monies and resources into the city, we believe. If you don't define something and give it a name, it doesn't really exist, and you can't promote it to other people. And so we would like to just create this thing and call it a district. And we see it bringing a focus automatically in, not only in the downtown area, but spreading out into east and west into the two neighborhoods which are historic in nature and are the original two neighborhoods of the city of Urbana, especially to the east, because the east side of the town has been almost kind of forgotten in a lot of ways, as far as nobody's really aware of what the historic nature of that part of town is. I have a sense that it was a blue-collar neighborhood for a long time. This would actually help integrate it back into the city in a different kind of a way. And we foresee, after the inauguration or the acceptance of this concept, having an opening celebration that connects music and arts and perhaps theater at each of these locations. And we've already had conversations with members of the community who find this extremely exciting. And we have actually talked to business people. I went and I visited all the businesses downtown on Saturday, and unanimously the business people seem to be very interested in anything that would promote the city in a new way, because they feel that whatever has happened up until this time has not worked too well. And they're grasping for new ways of looking at the promotion of the near downtown. So
Okay.
That's it.
Thank you, Dennis and Ilona. Are there questions for either of them? Charlie, and then Brandon.
Yeah, I am completely supportive of this. I think anything that adds to the cultural and I think what Danny Otto mentioned earlier, the historical preservation aspects of all this, though it isn't historical preservation, it identifies the cultural part of the community, and I think it gives, it adds to the overall ambiance that Urbana has a cultural component that is significant. And in a small town, we need to have something that distinguishes us. And I think that it adds to the selling point. There's a New York Times article I wanted to get to everybody that talks about how people coming onto the job market today are really after places to live first, not the job necessarily. They will go someplace to live before they will, think about a job. They'll move to Seattle, or they'll move to Portland, or they'll move to Kalamazoo or whatever, simply because there's something there that they're attracted to and they want to be associated with. That's the kind of thing that we need to be working on, and I think this helps contribute to that. I can see why downtown merchants might find this attractive. The one issue that's been raised, and Karen Coomer sent an email. I don't know if anybody else has had a chance to look at it, but there is the one issue that she raises that I think is important to consider is that we have a Royer Historic District, which is a couple of houses in my neighborhood there at Busey and Nevada and Busey and Oregon. And so you have a Royer Historic District and a Royer Architectural District. There's a bit of a problem, I think, right there, and so that might be my only objection to the word district in this. I totally understand. We have enterprise zones, we have TIF districts, we have the other districts as you've described. Maybe because we have a historic Royer district, we do need to use a different word. Maybe architectural zone might be acceptable, or something like that would have essentially the same meaning, but would make a little bit more distinction from the Royer Historic District that currently exists. Another thing I would like to see, of course, if you're going to identify Royer's properties, I would at least like to see, you might have a district or a zone or whatever, but I would like to see the brochure include all of the other Royer properties that are, just to have them all in one place. We have the Royer Historic District, of course, which isn't mentioned in the brochure. I believe Royer is associated with the high school, right? Okay, so, that's a significant and major piece of architecture right in the center of Urbana, and I think that at least belongs in the brochure. So, my 2 cents. Thank you.
Brandon?
Yeah, I first want to thank you both. You've done a lot of work, and especially Alona, you uncovered, these Royer properties, and Dennis in designing this brochure, which I think is very professional and nice. I have a question about the name. Is there any other, I understand the concern from the Historic Preservation Commissioners about the word district, but I know you're asking for it to be called architectural district and that's different than historic district. Is there any other term you've thought of after the conversation has come this far that's acceptable, that doesn't have the word district in it, but some other name? I know you said walking tour didn't quite capture it, which I agree, and area or zone maybe don't quite capture it. Are there any other terms just off the top of your heads that are acceptable to you?
Well, yeah, but it also has the district. But I thought about Joseph Royer Architectural and Art District. And art district is a very common term in many cities. And many of these art districts are actually parts of historic districts. The two can overlap. Districts can overlap. Historic districts can overlap with districts that are not historic, but entertainment districts, art districts, whatever people come up with. And I think art would be a good term because this area would also celebrate the arts, and I believe that the arts should be used to basically economically and culturally revitalize this area. So the term architecture and art would express what we are celebrating and what we are doing here. Another thing I would like to emphasize is that I don't see a conflict or a problem with the fact that there is a Royer Historic District. We just have to point out that, yes, Royer was a great guy, and we have a historic district for his house and his mother-in-law's cottage, and here we have an architecture and art district for him where he created, and where we want to continue this creation with by bringing in the arts. So I don't see why these have to be conflicted. I think they can work together. There's more to this idea.
Brandon and Danielle.
Okay, so I think we might not solve the name issue tonight, and I urge you to all collaborate and come to something. I think architecture and art district makes a lot of sense. We do have things like the Cranard Art and Entertainment District that we've put into place, and nobody had a concern, that was going to be confused with a historic district. So I think maybe the word art district helps clarify that it's something very different.
And note we have 2 Cranard centers. We have 2 Cranard buildings also for music. And nobody gets confused about that in particular.
So I'd like to actually put a motion on the floor, if that's okay, so we have something on the floor to discuss. The motion I'd like to make is to move forward the 2 staff recommendations. One was to work with the Historic Preservation Commission to improve the wording and content of the brochure, avoiding, maybe adjusting the use of historic district terminology in collaboration with the preparers. So to continue collaborating to come up with wording that's right. We won't get that tonight, but you can work together on that. And secondly, to apply for a grant from the Illinois Historic Preservation Agency to help fund production of the proposed brochure. And I'd like to add a third piece to the motion, which is something that came from the Historic Preservation Commission, but that wasn't really retained in the staff motion, but that I had an email back and forth with Libby about, and that I really think is important, which you pointed out too, which was marking the district. So I'd like to add point 3 from the Commission's recommendation, which was to approve future funding for marking historic buildings or building sites in the district, such as the Royer office site and the perimeter of the district at logical approaches. And I'd like to just add that we do that in conjunction with the other historic marking that we have on the agenda here this evening.
And is this a motion that you would recommend forwarding to council for approval, or tonight can we?
I think since it's just directing staff, we can just make it here and make that motion.
Okay, so there's been a motion. Is there a second? Charlie, there's been a second. Is there further discussion about this motion that has 3 parts? Danielle.
Yeah, I'm going to talk about the motion and a little bit of my comments of the bigger picture because they're related. The first is, I I very much support this, and I also very much support grassroots efforts by groups of people who put their hard work into something and build consensus with a group of folks. It doesn't always need to come from the city, and I'm really happy to see the two of you with, I know Robin Kierton's been involved and others to put something like this together. I think one piece, and a little bit because I've been serving on the task force and privy to those conversations, I want to bring that to the table for committee, interest, which is, I actually see this as a subset of a bigger picture, and even speaking with Alona, I think that we're in agreement in this kind of arts and architecture district, in which there would be a Royer thread, there would be like the historic Urbana, where there's specific designated historic markers that have been preserved historically. There's West Main Street. So there are these threads that kind of emanate from the downtown in different ways. And the Arts Task Force has spoken about an arts thread as well, kind of coming through with its focus on the downtown. So I guess I support the celebration with music, banners. We talked about definitely the markers, the brochure, the motion on the table, and actually I think we should look at perhaps expanding it after we've moved on this to look at some of these other issues that have been recommended. But the one thing is spending a lot of money commemorating the outskirts of a district that might actually be part of a thread that is part of a bigger district. So that's the one piece I'm concerned about, is that perhaps we should actually have markers for a larger arts and architecture district, and then there are site-specific markers in front of different properties. That's the only thing I think we should consider. The second piece, and this doesn't preclude anything that's been said already, is that let's do something different, because we're Urbana and we don't have to always do it exactly the way other people have done it. And I remember being a kid and actually laughing at those little dry looking square boxes that sit in front that kind of have this long verbose way of talking about things. I'd like for the arts component that the task force is considering, that perhaps the first thing that the Public Arts Commission does, and we hope to have budget and establishment of that commission in 2008, is to commission works for this project. And so instead of having the boring kind of dry bronze-looking square things with the bust and the cut-off, dude head, let's do something that actually is playful and teaches architecture. I mean, one of the things that I think you've taught me through this and that I didn't know was that I've admired these buildings for so long. They're so fascinating, and they have faces, and they speak to you. There's just a real dynamic presence for a lot of the buildings in Urbana, and I think that's one of the things that makes our community lovely. So the question is, how can we teach the accents? I mean, I look at this peaked top. How can we have maybe a treasure hunt or have a way of teaching the different elements of what makes this architecture significant, so that it becomes a family-friendly activity, so that it actually has an aspect of mystery to it instead of the same dry, boring, historic blah, blah, blah that always happens. So that's another consideration. It's let's bring the Arts Commission and program into this as an addition to what, to the motion on the table.
Okay, Mayor.
You've caught exactly the feeling that we're actually trying to achieve here.
As it was Dennis that brought it to my attention that it's going to be Urbana's 175th birthday. So I think we should tie this in with the birthday celebration also.
Sure.
But definitely, I agree with what Danielle said, that part of the motion should say something about the arts.
Could the motion also say that you actually accept the idea?
I'll make that friendly amendment to the motion if you'd like.
Okay, so, and are we going to add anything about the arts?
Yes.
And the other part was that we accept the idea?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, both?
Yes.
So, Phyllis, I think you're getting all that, right? And the birthday tie-in.
And the birthday
Okay, so now
tie-in.
we kind of have a motion of 6 parts, which I frankly can't reiterate, so. So let's just vote. I think, okay, all those in favor of this motion of 6 parts, which Phyllis has dutifully noted, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. At this point in time, I'd like an amendment or a motion to move item 16, which is an item that Mr. Alan Strong is here to talk about, and since he's been here, could we move that up to the head of the rest of the agenda?
I think that'll-
So is there a motion to do that?
I'd move it.
Second.
Okay, it's done. All those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
It's moved.
Take this one, 2 minutes here, let's get this one done.
Oh, at this time, there are some, Dennis has pointed out to me that there are some public comment cards about the Royer District.
Oh.
So let's do those,
Okay.
and then item 16. Okay, so let's get those, and so Dennis, I turn it back over to you.
Well, thank you very much. I really appreciate your assistance in this. We have quite a few people who've requested to comment on actually 3 different items, but I'll just start going through them, and you can make the comments as you need to. Let's start with Sophia Lewis, wishes to comment on the Joseph Royer brochure and district. Welcome, Sophia.
Hi.
Let us know where you live.
I live in southeast Urbana on Water Street. Good evening, everyone. My name is Sophia Lewis, and I'm coming here in support of the Joseph W. Royer Architectural District as a degreed person in architecture who attended the lecture given by Ms. Matkowski on yesterday. And at first, when she delivered the lecture, honestly, I did think a couple of things which she actually dispelled both here and during the lecture, and that is that, number one, not everyone is an architecture enthusiast, but she did clarify how the gold plaques would go on the buildings, and this whole thing would be a teaching artifice for the whole community. And I noticed that most of the people in attendance at Ms. Matkowski's lecture were senior citizens. I mean, there are valuable senior citizens. They were giving their input about their master's degree studies in the architectural history and so forth. But at the time, I was thinking that maybe, unless you're the type who goes down every activity in the leisure district book, you may not be as interested in this kind of thing. However, she dispelled all of that. And also, the second thing that occurred to me quickly was that you could have a district that could become a part of many things that are commemorated to the point where nothing is memorable. So I think hearing her today addressed a lot of those issues as well. I wasn't aware of as many of those things. And by the way, I think maybe the distinction, instead of being between whether or not it's the historic district as opposed to, what was the other item?
Arts.
Historic versus arts, it might be like the old versus new, because I've been a resident for Urbana for some time now, and that's by choice. I liked what someone's input was earlier when they said that Urbana is a city of thoughtful processes. However, at the same time, and on that note, I was very proud that the mayor had gotten the city out of the deficit. I think she's to be commended for that. I don't think, well, that's what I heard anyway.
That's like our recycling of the light bulbs. Our reputation is that you're not exceeding our
Performance, yeah.
But anyway, we are making progress.
Oh, okay. Not even the President of the United States, I think, has done that, so that's why I was kind of excited when I heard that. And also, having rented a lot of problem properties, I was very proud of what Mr. Bowersox did in terms of getting a rental registration program in place. Everyone, okay, great. Because I had proposed something like that similar to the tenant union in Champaign regarding their city about 3 years ago. So I was happy about that. And I was looking mostly in terms, when I think of architecture and commemorative architecture of the future, I think of potential developments by the interchange contemporary architecture in the form of maybe an interior mall. another premier mall, and I'm just imitating, like, I'm just relaying the rumblings of citizens who talk all the time about whether or not, you know, we either make Lincoln Square again, or have a mall that rivals, you know, this kind of, well, malls in other areas. So Ms. Matkowski's lecture got me thinking that instead of going straight to the contemporary architecture, having this core downtown in the form of this architectural district would be a good way for some of the other future key works of architecture to have some sort of organic growth from that in the center. So I was very pleased with all of that. I was very enthralled by her talk, and I'm just voicing my support for that district. And on that note about the economy, I'm very much in favor. Anytime I can spend money in Urbana, I'm happy to do it. I'm all in favor of the, I have high hopes for the economy of the city of Urbana. And I challenge every single last one of you on that note to do something I tried to do last fall and was not successful, and that is to find a winter coat within the city limits of Urbana.
Bella Home.
Who?
Bella Home.
Bella Home?
Bella Home. Go downtown Champaign, or downtown Urbana. Bella, B-E-L-L-A, Home. They have, Carmen Kirby has taken some of her product that is at Bella Boutique over in Champaign and brought it over to Urbana. So she has a awesome store. No one's been up there. Everyone should go up there. It's a great store. But I bet you'll find a winter coat there.
I've been up there 4 times.
Okay. All right. Is it just her, though?
Thank you, Sophia.
Okay. Thank you very much.
All right, we have a couple other presenters here. Betsy Cronin, is she here still? Yes, Betsy. The long-suffering supporters of the...
We get extra points for lasting so long.
That's right. It means more now.
Betsy Cronin, 305 West High, and you've all had a long evening, and I will not waste your time because between Alice and several other people, everything's been said. But I think I support historic preservation, and I think it's going to take a lot of will and energy on the part of the city staff and you guys to get it accomplished here. But we have some wonderful resources, and it's time we put some energy into saving them for future generations. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Brian Adams.
Brian Adams from 412 West Elm Street in Urbana, and I just wanted to summarize my general thoughts on all of these preservation issues that are here, just to be quick about it. I just wanted to thank Dennis Roberts for all the creative ideas he's proposed to improve historic preservation in Urbana. I think they're all great ideas, and they should be supported by the City Council, and I wanted to thank the City Council for also taking the time to read through these things and consider them seriously. I did want to say that probably the thing I'm most interested in and concerned about is the demolition delay ordinance that's been proposed. I think that it's really an important thing that the city needs to consider. I don't think that by conducting more architectural surveys to determine which buildings should be landmarked or which are significant is really going to help us much. I think it would be an incredible waste of time and money. All it might tell us is that we've lost so many more buildings since we did the last survey. By having some sort of a demolition delay ordinance, it would give us the time to really focus on potentially significant buildings that are being targeted and are really at threat, and rather than just spend 2 or 3 years trying to come up with a laundry list of buildings, having some sort of a delay ordinance that would force us to look at a building and give us the time to decide, is it significant, is it architecturally, historically worth possibly landmarking. So I think that, again, I think that's a very important thing that I'd like to see the city consider seriously, the demolition delay ordinance. And that's pretty much it. I just want to thank the council again for taking this time to consider all these issues.
Yes, thank you so much, Brian. We have 2 more. Bernadine Stake. Welcome.
I certainly appreciate the fact that you are all working on historic preservation. And the Joseph W. Royer Historic Architectural District, I certainly support. It's a good idea, I think. And one of the things that I'm conscious of is that we have many people coming here from other countries, and one of those is Alona, who is really helping us out to recognize our treasures that we have here in Urbana. Another one is David Monk, who has helped us so much he's from Australia, and he has helped us so much to recognize our treasures in Urbana. But we aren't saving them as fast as we should be saving them. They are going to be gone. There are so many that are already gone. And as this friend of mine who happens to be from Australia and who is at our home right now has said that they do see the decline, since he was here a long time ago, in Urbana, but also some signs of that there's a slow restoration starting. But they were very disappointed, of course, that Lincoln Square is gone as far as many of the shops are concerned, so we can't buy much in Urbana. We can buy a few things. I agree to that. And it's wonderful that we have some new places like Mirabelle's and others. But the main thing I wanted to say, too, is that demolition, we have to have a demolition ordinance. That's the way to save it. That's the way they saved all those buildings in Galena, Illinois, where they have 85% of all their buildings restored. And you should have seen the ramshackle things that they did restore. You know, you look at something and say you can't restore it, but you can. Almost all of these can be restored if you really take the time and work at it. So there just has to be some way of stopping all the demolition. And we don't have an ordinance. They have a wonderful one in Galena, Illinois. They just say you can't destroy it, and so that's the way they've saved all their buildings. So there's no reason for us not to have it, as far as I'm concerned. What else? Of course, as you know, I worked on the Channing Murray Foundation and put that on the National Register of Historic Places. And I think the district is good, but we need a lot more of real historic preservation also. Not just saying it's a district, but making sure that what's in that district is preserved. So I'm in favor of all of this, and I thank you all for all the work that you do, and hope that we save most of Urbana from now on.
Thank you, Bernadine. And lastly, Linda Lorenz. Oh, yes.
Linda Lorenz. I live at 409 West High. I attended the lecture. I was one of those senior citizens, and I was born here. I was amazed to discover how many of the buildings that I know, including the high school from which I graduated, were all designed by one person. I want you to know that a great deal of volunteer work has gone into this by two very well-educated, well-informed people, and that's Brian and Alona. You cannot imagine the amount of time those two people have spent on this kind of research for us to find out something about the place in which we all live and the buildings that we pass over and over. And there's been a great deal of work by Dennis Roberts and by people on this city council past what you all do by your defined job, and I think that shows how much people really, really care about this, to spend that much time and do this kind of stuff. It's absolutely astounding. I went to after Alona's lecture, I went to the knit shop, and have too much arthritis in my hands to knit anymore, but the first thing I noticed when I walked in that place were the wood floors were in such beautiful shape. They're so beautiful. What if they had torn that little house down and put up another one of these dreadful things on stilts? It was just delightful to see that, and I remind you that if we had, by just 6 hours, we almost lost those 2 mansions over on Elm Street. So I'm definitely in favor of some kind of review on demolition, and I hope that you can pass a moratorium right now and stop all of this until we get this thing in place and get it properly worded, however that is. I ride my bike to work, and I see a lot of things up close. You see a lot more than driving along in your car in one of the main streets. And I'm really ashamed of what's happened to some of the buildings in my neighborhood that are owned by people that don't even live in this city, and they just go down the tubes. And we're so lucky we passed that rental registration, but I hope it's not too late for some of these buildings. The building across the street from me was so beautiful when I moved in, and it looks terrible now. And I know it's a mess inside. I know they had water in the basement, and the furnace was all screwed up. It just, I canvass for the neighborhood and some of the things that we do, and every once in a while I get invited into the front hall. The wood, the carving, the beauty inside of these homes in our neighborhood are just astounding, and I hope we're not going to lose that. So, yes, I'm in favor of this district, or whatever you want to call it when you get it all together, but we have such a fantastic place here. Let's get it together and protect it and enhance it and take advantage of it all, please.
Thank you very much. It's now 10. We have potentially some really big, good discussions ahead of us. Is there a feeling to just proceed forward and continue, or should we, is there a motion?
We definitely need to do 16.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, we have budget.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
In other words, we'd like to postpone item 8 and 9 for the next committee of the whole discussion while we have more time and energy to wade into these lengthy discussions. Okay.
So 16 is right now.
All right. Well, we should make a motion to. We have. Has it passed?
Motion to move 16 up to next.
You can take that after.
Okay. Well, let's go to 16 then. Okay. This is an ordinance number 2007-09-109, an ordinance approving a second amendment to the redevelopment agreement with Alan Strong, 395 North Race Street. Community Development, and Tom Carino.
Evening. Before you, you have an amendment to a development agreement with Alan Strong for a project on Race Street. You have the memo before you. Due to a variety of reasons, Mr. Strong, as developer, has been unable to move forward with the project, and we did receive a letter from Mr. Strong dated March 19th requesting an extension of the agreement and a continued commitment to move forward with the project. And so the amendment that you have before you can be summarized in that it offers an extension of the development agreement until December 31st, 2008.
Okay.
If you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them, and Mr. Strong is also here to answer any questions you might have.
Does Mr. Strong need to speak at this time, or?
I think Mr. Strong is here to field questions. I'm not sure if he has a presentation planned.
Okay. All right. Who has questions or for Tom or discussion? Brandon, I guess you were first.
Thanks to Tom and to Alan Strong for bringing this forward. I'm so supportive of this project. I'm really excited to see, Mr. Strong operates other projects in Urbana really well. I love the restaurants, and I think he could do a great job at this too. I'm so excited that I want to, get out and help dig tomorrow and get this thing out of the ground. So I wonder, Tom, as far as you've talked about the schedule, I know the deadline is now December of 2008. There were hurdles in the past that had held up the schedule. Are the hurdles clear? And at least from your perspective, do you see that we've got the trouble spots out of the way so that we really can move forward this time?
My impression was that the hurdle related to neighboring property owners still exists, but there are also additional hurdles related to business concerns that have delayed the project. And I'm not sure if we've cleared those hurdles, but Mr. Strong has continued to show commitment for the project and has actually started with phase 1 of the project, which involved cleaning up the site to some extent. So Mr. Strong has shown commitment in moving forward with a portion of the project, and again has shown commitment in moving forward with the rest of the project, although I don't think all of the hurdles have quite been cleared yet.
Okay, thank you.
Danielle.
Is this the same agreement that we passed in the past except an extension of the date? Or is there any other changes to the agreement?
While I wasn't here for the original agreement, I've read the original agreement, and my impression is that we're really just extending the date.
Okay. I'm extremely supportive of this project. I hope to see it go forward sometime in the next year.
Heather.
Mr. Strong has shown a strong commitment to the city of Urbana, and I believe that granting this extension would behoove the city. I want to commend you on your commitment to the city of Urbana with your restaurants, and I enjoy your food often. So I would move ordinance number 2007-09-014, the recommendation for approval.
Second.
Okay, it's been motioned to approve and forward to council and seconded. Those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, it's moved forward to city council. What's the pleasure of council?
I'd like to make a motion to postpone items 7 and 8 until the next committee of the whole. 8 and 9, I'm sorry, 8 and 9, to the next committee of the whole.
Okay, and there's a motion to postpone number 8 and 9.
Second.
It's been seconded. Is there discussion about that change? Yes.
Just a brief question.
Danielle.
Is there something that staff wants from us in the meantime? I mean, I know that they've ramped up for a presentation this evening and conversation. I totally support the motion. But if we could just, if there's something, some questions that staff have or some way that we can help facilitate the process between now and when it comes back, I'd like to hear from them at least.
And Libby Tyler will address that question.
I think we've done our best shot at both rather complex issues, and you've seen the incentives at least once before, demolition at least once before, so it's a lot of information. I would just review it and ask any questions of staff if you have other ideas, and you can do a supplement if necessary, but I don't think any specific direction in the meanwhile would be necessary.
Okay, thanks.
Other discussion? Okay, so the motion has, let's see, we've already passed that, right? Didn't we just vote on that? We did not vote yet. Okay. All right, so those in favor of postponing item discussion number 8, historic preservation incentives, and item number 9 on the agenda, demolition review for protection of historic resources, to the committee of the whole in 2 weeks, indicate so by saying aye.
Aye.
And those opposed? Those are removed from the agenda. They will reappear in 2 weeks. We have a traffic study report, item number 10. Chief of Police Beely, would you please, are you ready for yourself, for your presentation?
Good evening. I've asked Acting Assistant Chief Anthony Cobb to assist me tonight with any questions. Also, we have Lieutenant Jepson in attendance, also to help with questions. As you might recall, Illinois law mandates that certain information be collected on all traffic stops by every law enforcement agency in the state of Illinois. This information is then transmitted to the Illinois Department of Transportation, who then forwards it to Northwestern University for compilation and analysis. I believe everybody got in their packet the 2006 calendar year traffic stop report for the Urbana Police Department. I know Charlie had a little trouble with his packet, but I hope everybody else did. You'll notice that we made 960 more traffic stops in 2006 than we did in 2005. I believe that can be attributed to improving manpower situations over the previous year. While making the 906 additional traffic stops, our minority stop ratio, which if you'll recall from previous years is all based on our assigned minority driving population, that assignment comes from Northwestern, increased from a 1.44 to a 1.53. During the past year, my command staff and I have spent a significant amount of time analyzing the numbers contained in this report. We do not believe that Urbana police officers are stopping vehicles solely based on the race of the driver. The sole goal and purpose of this study should not be, in my opinion, to attempt to make the minority stop ratio a perfect 1. I believe to do this, while it could be attainable, would be to manipulate the numbers at the expense of the citizens we serve. I believe that the additional information that we've put together beyond the one-page state traffic stop study report gives us a more accurate picture of the information. We continue to believe there's a strong correlation between calls for service in the areas that show higher numbers of traffic stops. Traffic stops are a component of an overall approach to dealing with criminal problems in any given location. And that goes specifically to Table 15, which shows our total calls for service breakdown. During last year's discussion on this topic, it became apparent that a zip code analysis of those stopped would be helpful. New in this year's report, we have the zip code breakdown of all the drivers for the 4,015 traffic stops that we made last year. It's certainly noteworthy that of those 4,015 traffic stops, 53 listed Urbana zip code as their residence, while 43% lived outside the city. Anti-biased policing remains an important oversight responsibility of the command staff at the Urbana Police Department. This is a responsibility that I can assure you we take quite seriously. I want to be clear that racial profiling will not be tolerated at the Urbana Police Department. We'll continue to take the appropriate steps to make sure that traffic stops are made because of behavior and not because of race. Those steps include many that we have undertaken years ago but continue to this day, including a review of our racial profiling, anti-racial profiling directives, a review of individual officers' traffic stops by their supervisors and by the patrol commander. We talked about the past couple years the need for a quality video system so that we can do random inspections of those traffic stops. It was a longer process than we anticipated, but it is now installed, up and running, and I think that's going to be a big benefit in the future to those efforts. The entire police department, civilians included, will undergo diversity training in October of this year. We will continue to actively and seriously investigate all allegations of racial profiling brought to our attention. The contents of this report that you have in front of you will be the topic of discussion at shift briefings so that all Urbana police officers know the collective information contained in this report. And finally, we encourage anyone who believes they've been the victim of racial profiling to contact my office or any other office within the city. And the pending Citizen Review Board should provide another avenue to express that concern. With that, and with the time of night, I will take questions.
Yes, Danielle.
Thanks for your thorough report and also for the additional statistics. I think that was helpful. And I generally agree that we've talked about this, for a number of years now, since Obama put forward the legislation in the state of Illinois, and that's where this came from. But and I think I agree that actually the Citizen Review Board is probably our best bet in terms of trying to assess any issues, if there are, of racial profiling. So I do have just a couple of questions. One is as to the equipment violations and consent searches. I know last year we discussed, and there wasn't necessarily a motion from council regarding this, talking about how consent searches don't really seem to net much in terms of, but they're fairly intrusive. And so looking at the consent searches, it seems like even this year, much like last year, there were dozen consent searches and turned up one instance of contraband. And so I guess my question is to you, I know you were considering stopping consent searches, and it looks as though you didn't, and I want to understand your reasoning behind that decision.
The actual consent searches, 12 searches out of 4,000 traffic stop, was a very low number, but still the breakdown in front of you was concerning. So I tasked my acting assistant chief with hand searching those 12, and he can speak more to this issue, but what we found was inaccurate reporting by our officers of whether those were consent searches. For all 4,015 traffic stops, the officers are required to put a sticker, provide separate information than we normally would on the traffic ticket, and that data is captured, entered by the clerks, electronically sent to the Department of Transportation. When he hand searched those 12, he found out that several of the 12, most of the 12, were not consent searches at all. They were probable cause searches. Okay. And how many did you think were actual consent searches? 2. Okay. 2 out of 12 out of 4,000 traffic stops. And you're right, you and I had the discussion, and internally we had the discussion about eliminating consent searches. I think the more proper way to go is the judicial use of consent searches. There are certainly scenarios police officers could come up with that, barring the officers from ever doing a consent search, which is a legal tool in their toolbox to investigate crime, could be a huge mistake. There are scenarios. So I think the proper way to go is to analyze, just as we did here, why do these numbers look the way they do? We figured that out, and then just have the proper procedures in place for somebody's going to ask for a consent search. They better be able to articulate why.
Okay, that's helpful. And then my second question has to do with equipment violations, and in particular, this is something I didn't understand before. I've always had, go outside, I have on my car some beads hanging from the rear view mirror, and I come to understand that actually it's a state violation to have this thing hanging from my rear view mirror. And it's also a violation to have, say, one of 2 lights out on your license plate or other minor things. And some of the stories that I hear reported have to do with these minor equipment violations and stops coming from that. Can you speak to, but I don't understand the details, so I'd really like to hear from you what our policy is regarding what we consider to be the threshold by which we do equipment stops. If there are problems with people's cars, are we stopping folks for having things hanging from their fuzzy dice hanging from their rear view mirror? Are we stopping folks with 1 light out of 2 on their license plate, et cetera? And if so, if we could understand some of the rationale behind that. Okay.
The threshold for what people can be stopped for is state law. We don't, as a matter of policy, say we're going to stop for fuzzy dice, or we're going to stop for running this stop sign but not that stop, fuzzy dice but not fuzzy, or beads but not fuzzy dice is what I meant to say. State law dictates what is a legal stop and what is not a legal stop, what a law is for. I can tell you that we as a matter of practice, not a matter of policy, but as a matter of practice, don't spend a lot of time stopping people for the more minor violations, because, as everybody here knows, the major violations are out there, as many as we can get and more. But I couldn't begin to give you a breakdown of fuzzy dice versus the other things. I just would say it is far less probably than what you think. And again, I will extend the invitation that I've extended several times. If you have any concerns, if you have any stories or names, please forward them. Other council people have, and we have looked into those and found out sometimes that the rumor or the story that they have heard is not quite accurate.
Yeah, and I appreciate that invitation, and I have taken you up on it before, and I feel like your office has been very responsive.
Absolutely.
Robert Lewis.
Well, thanks, Mr. Bealey, for your additional report this year. I did, upon your request, review this information quite extensively. Unfortunately, when I look at by zip code, it only adds to the complication. I have to reiterate what I mentioned last year. I understand how this comes about with regard to the Western University. They go and crash the numbers and find out what's going on, and they give you a distribution. And I think, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but the way I see the data generated from Urbana, Champaign, and the University of Illinois Police Department, it can only be accurate if all three work in harmony with one another on data results. There's no way that you can, by looking at your exhibit on table 19, where we have 53% Urbana residents and 47% outside of Urbana, if other entities will not do the same thing, there's no way to synthesize this data such that you can get an accurate picture of what's really going on. That's my view. And that's, I understand what the objective is, but if the objective is to identify the number of stops relative to African Americans, that's impossible based on what I see here. We got a statisticians on board here. I don't know if he looked at it that hard, but that's the way I see it. And until, I think like Minneapolis, St. Paul would be an example, unless everybody's working together, you can never come up with accurate numbers.
I'm not sure I follow you. Each city is assigned a separate minority driving population.
I understand
I see
that.
you're saying look at it as a community as a whole. Unfortunately, that's not the way the law is set up. State law governs this process.
By proximity, I'm saying. The practical aspect of it is, the population from Urbana goes to Champaign, some goes to the University of Illinois. And I got three sets of numbers. What can I do with that?
I don't disagree with you, but again, understand we're all assigned different numbers from Northwestern. So we're operating under the law.
I understand it. But what I'm telling you is, I appreciate what you've done in trying to size up the issue. But from what I see, it presents itself as a false set of numbers relative to our community.
I understand.
Okay.
Have other concerns? Yes, Charlie?
I was very critical of the the statistical underpinning of this whole thing last year, and I don't want to go into it too far. if all you have to do is look at Table 15 or Table 17 or Table 18, and you understand why the numbers come out sort of like they do, without doing a statistical analysis, which, to do a proper statistical analysis takes far more tools than we have the resources to do. The numbers need to be crunched, controlling for many, many different variables here. Economics, zip code, gender, race, all these other things. Just looking at pairs, factor A by factor B, if you don't control for factors C, D, E, and F, you really can't draw valid conclusions. So this is a very two-dimensional view of the data. Then there's the whole issue of, what's the real population underneath this, and unless you're going to actually go out there and count exactly what you see driving around in the cars, you probably have no really good measure. There are no error bars associated with this stuff. We really need error bars associated with the estimates of what our minority and what our driving population is from Northwestern. Without that, you really can't even move forward on this. What are the deviations on the actual proportions that are given on page 2? Without knowing what some of the assumptions that are being used in the Northwestern study, you really can't, you really don't know. Is 1.47 statistically different from 1? Hard to say. Is 2.66 statistically different from 1? Probably. But you without really understanding all of the assumptions that are made, it's really not. It really doesn't give you a picture. What's more important is that we are documenting what our officers are doing. The cameras, the review process, that sort of thing. That's the important piece of this. And then you take a look at table. And so then if you take a look at table 15 or 17, and you're going where the action is or where you requested to go, there's your explanation of why your numbers are different from what. I suspect that if I were to crunch these numbers and could try to control for a bunch of different things, I would probably say, okay, there's a geographical component to all of this data that isn't being included in these proportions. And once you control for that geographical component using one of these other tables, all of a sudden your numbers come out and look like we're just simply doing our jobs. I think the police department is doing its job. They're going where the action is. They're going where their clients are. They're going where I go, when I have computer problems, I go to where the action is. I wouldn't be doing my job. I don't go around and check all the computers that are working perfectly fine to cook my books. I go to where the problems are, and that's what I deal with. So you go where you're asked to go, and I think the biggest thing here that's missing is a geographic analysis. And once and you can sort of see that, it's almost it hits you between the eyes. And once you do that, I understand why the numbers are coming out the way they are, and I have no concerns. And I think the police department's doing a fine job here. So thank you. But I wish I like the idea that we're tracking this stuff, but I wish it wouldn't take so much time and effort to get it done. If the state wants to mandate it, they should do the analysis for us and do it properly statistically.
I've got a question, actually. Does anybody else in council have further questions? I'll take my turn, I guess. I was interested to kind of, maybe you could explain to me, you also have a map attached to the back of the report that shows the 4 beats that are in Urbana, the city of Urbana district, and you have listed the calls for service, the traffic stops, and total crimes. How relevant is it to actually break down things by beat? The beats are huge areas of the city, and they cross a lot of different kinds of neighborhood types. And while I'm sure it's probably a logical way of amassing information because the officers are grouped by beats, it's hard to picture the real crime density in a beat just by looking at a box that has a very interesting gerrymandered sort of shape, and it's a solid color. And I'm wondering if if a technique that's used by the News Gazette, where every week they show basically the downtown of Champaign-Urbana, and they have a like a compilation of dots or something like that, it would be a somewhat a more useful graphic tool for us to understand what's hot in what part of our neighborhoods.
I guess there's a couple components to that if you're talking about simply crime separate from the traffic stop study. What this map attempts to do is to relate the table 15 by how we assign our officers by beat. And you're right, it could be much better. I did some quick calculations today. We have probably in excess of 500 hours collecting and putting this data together, and it seems every time that we internally analyze this data, we can find another 20 or 30 or 40 or 50 hours worth of time that would provide us with what we think would be further additional better information, and the same for you. This was our attempt. I don't think this was on the first year's report. This was our attempt last year to provide some kind of geographic picture, if you will. Next year, obviously, the data will be broken down a little bit better because we added the fifth beat. We have 65. Still has almost the same problem that you're talking about now. Everything will be divided up into 5 different beats rather than 4. If you're talking about simply crime problems or criminal issues, we do produce at the end of the year a map that breaks it down quite a bit more than this. Each beat has what we call a geocode, and in each of those geocodes we break down all the crimes. And we do that for the purpose of people quite a bit come to the police department and say, is this area safe to live in? And we don't want to make the independent judgments, yes, live here, don't live here, we don't do that. What we do is give them a year by year a further breakdown to then put the traffic stops on top of that. That is what would become, I think, more time consuming. So
And
I don't
maybe
know if
not
that
so
is-
useful, actually.
Yeah, I don't know, but if the question's more specific to crime in specific locations, we have that, yes.
I think most people in town are curious about that aspect the most. Traffic stops occur at anywhere there's a stop sign that somebody doesn't, obey. But crime is often a lot more pinpointed due to the intent of the perpetrator, to get something from somebody somewhere.
Yeah, we have those readily available at the front desk. It might even be on our website, but certainly at the front desk, our 2006 information should already be printed.
Yeah. Well, it might be interesting to see those and share them in council.
Absolutely get it to you.
Thank you. Brandon.
Yeah, I just wanted to add a final comment. I mean, Charlie, in your discussions, you kind of said, well, we're doing all we can and we can't really draw a lot of conclusions from these numbers. But I guess I just want to point out that our job is not completely done yet. When you look at these numbers, for example, African Americans as one of the groups here, they're 15% of the population, but in terms of our customer service, they're 51% of the offenders and 39% of the victims. They're way overrepresented among offenders of crimes and victims of crime and people who report crimes and people who witness crimes in our community. And so our job isn't completely done, and it's not just the job of the police force, it's the job of us all as a community to deal with disproportionate minority involvement and contact in the criminal justice system. And so that job isn't done. I hope we can all continue to work towards equality there, and it's not just a racial thing either. There are class factors and poverty factors that are tied to criminal behaviors. So there are things in the numbers that really you can draw conclusions about and that really show that there's more progress to be made here.
What I'd like to point out, if I could, on that table that you're talking about, the difference between the traffic stop data that we report, table 15, where you're getting the statistics from, that is 100% reported by citizens. So that's the difference between some of the other tables, which is generated by us. We make the stops, we make the contacts. Those are reported by citizens. So you're right, and I don't want to give the impression that here it is, there's nothing more we can do. The command staff, the officers, we spend a great deal of time. This is not for a waste of time. There are a overwhelming number of things that we can get from all of these tables that are beneficial to us, and we continue to use those.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. That table isn't about the traffic stops. It's, it really is what happens in our community, and the fact that African Americans are calling to report crime and witnessing crime and being found to be the offenders in crimes at these staggering rates, way out of proportion to their part of the population. So thank you for making that point.
Any other commentary? Well, I guess this is basically an informational report.
Absolutely.
We appreciate it very much.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you so much, Chief Bealey and Lieutenant Cobb.
I have a motion.
Okay, Lynn Barnes, I recognize you.
I'm wondering if the council would consider moving 11, 12, 13, and 14, and 15 in omnibus fashion. And these are pretty straightforward, and we've been providing information, and even some we've heard about before for us to vote on tonight.
Okay, it's been motioned, and
I would second that motion.
Seconded by-
I'm really tired, and I think that, like Lynn said,
the
these are pretty
technology-
much straightforward things, and as long as it's a majority, or as long as it's a unanimous decision, maybe it's not going to be, I don't know.
Yes, Danielle.
Could we just pull off 11 from that and vote on it separately, because I have a potential perceived conflict of interest, and I'd like to be able to vote on the other things, but we could take the others in omnibus.
Okay.
So I'm going to recuse myself on 11.
Okay.
All right, let's do that then. We'll amend the.
I move to send item number 11, ordinance number 2007-09-106 to council with a recommendation for approval.
Second.
All right, discussion. Brandon.
I'll recuse myself too. I work in a building that has some of these windows being repaired, so that's not a conflict of interest, but definitely a perceived conflict of interest, and I'll also recuse myself.
Thank you so much. Well, for those of us who are left, is there any further discussion on the ordinance?
No.
All right.
We go home.
All right, those in favor of sending this forward to council with approval, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? It is sent forward with approval.
Okay, I move items 12,
Abstain,
13,
yes.
and 14, ordinance numbers 2007-09-107, 108, 103, and 105 to council with a recommendation for approval.
Okay, it's been seconded by Robert Lewis. Those in favor of doing so, please say aye.
Aye.
Oh, wait, all right, we're not supposed to be rushing
Do take the
forward.
business of the city
Council.
seriously, and I do have a single question about the recycling coordinator, and that's all.
Then Danielle,
which
please give us
is-
that question.
My question, if I can find the dang thing, is,
We're drowning in paper here.
I support a full-time position, but I expect more from that position. I mean, I expect that we'll see commercial, a recycling proposal, which we've been told we'll see for years now, and it's been upsetting that we haven't seen anything having to do with demolition or commercial. And so the first time I saw this, I thought, oh, we're pouring more money in something that I actually don't think, we have a great use cycle program, but I expect us to be achieving additional progress at every step. I actually think that our current vision of recycling is somewhat outdated, and I would like this commercial recycling coordinator to take into consideration the issue of the compact fluorescent light bulbs and other kinds of toxic waste that will, that emerge in our community. So I'd like, if we're going to support this, to see additional programming.
And Danielle, actually, I have a question about that too. Is recycling of flashlight batteries and other mercury batteries also part of the recycling process of our? Do we know that? Bill Gray, are you able to comment on that?
I'm sorry, the question is?
Is concerning also the recycling of common batteries, a battery program recycling. Do we accept used batteries in the recycling program?
No, curbside, we do not.
Do not. Yeah, we don't have a program for, okay. All right. Okay, we've had a motion, we've had discussion on one of the items. Did you make a motion to change the recycling coordinator position?
No, I wanted to make that statement, and we'll discuss it again in a week.
Directing staff to work on that. All right, so in an ominous fashion concerning ordinance 2007-09-106, an ordinance revising the annual budget. Oh, we already did that one. Ordinance number 2007-09-107, an ordinance revising annual budget, recycling coordination. 2007-09-108, an ordinance revising the annual budget, ordinance special census costs. 2007-09-103, concerning University Avenue corridor study, and ordinance number 2007-09-105, concerning employee retirement costs, the city clerk secretary. Those in favor of sending them forward to council with approval, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed? Okay, they are sent forward to city council. It being 10:45, we are standing adjourned.